No, wait,
had my
Jared's here?
Wait a minute. Is
Bro,
that
Jeremiah
Jeremiah Bannister?
Bannister's here.
Jeremiah.
Oh my
What?
gosh.
Is Paleocrat
No
in here?
way.
No way.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
real right now.
Jeremiah Bannister. Oh my goodness, the king himself.
Yeah.
What's
Guys,
up,
the king
brother?
Not much, man. I was getting ready for tomorrow's show. When my kids go to bed, I kind of have quiet finally, man, because this house is packed with kids and stuff. So when they go to bed, I'm like, I'll prepare for the show tomorrow. And so I'm getting it together and hop on Telegram for a second. I saw, because I just joined this chat, and I didn't know it was here before. And so I joined it today, and I saw that you guys had a live chat going. I'm like, I'll just hop in there, man. I've been in here for like 5 minutes, just enjoying the conversation about gaming, being called the N-word while you're gaming. Like, yeah, dude, I know. Yeah.
Dude, Jeremiah, I'm gonna simp for you right now, bro. You are so awesome. You are a great theologian. I mean, I know you're just like a lay theologian, but your content is awesome. You have definitely helped progress me in the faith. I know you've helped Pinesap as well. You are doing great work, and you're just awesome. So I want to thank you for all the content you put out. And if everybody doesn't know, Paleocrat, he's been featured on Meaning of Catholic, I believe, and Reason and Theology. Definitely go check him out.
Yeah, my show on Mondays is on. Hold on, let me put my alarm on here. I have an alarm system. So, here, I'll get up to this bedroom. So, yeah, I'm on Mondays on Reason and Theology, Wednesday and Friday, Meaning of Catholic, and then Monday mornings I'm on a morning show over there. But, dude, I'll tell you, man, it's mutual, man. You guys, I love what you guys are doing, and I've known about you for a minute. And got to know, of course, Pinesap, and then we just hit it off right away. And so when I heard, that the YouTube show was going to kick off, man, I was like, this is exactly the kind of thing we need. People like you guys who are bringing, you've done something powerful on Telegram, because Telegram, all these people who come here, a lot of them, dude, they were all kicked off other platforms. You know what I'm saying? And like before Trump got kicked off of Twitter and Facebook, no, it was just those communities. Well, there's a lot of, edgier stuff. And a lot of that ends up being real enthusiastic, and it gets real off to the edges and stuff, and emphasizing rupture and discontinuity and all that. And so to see the optics, to go to a channel like Pinesap, to go to you guys' channel, and to see the continuity where you've got pre-Vatican II bishop or popes, post-Vatican II popes, you've got support for Vatican II, you've got the continuity of the church, it's beautiful because you don't see that very often. It's like so many people either share a bunch of the modern popes and that's it, or they share just the old popes and you don't like the new ones. So to just see the optics and to know the love for the magisterium and to see it, and yet to be very traditional. Right, to be on that, to be on that line where you're reaching communities that a lot of mainstream Catholic groups do. They don't want nothing to do with it, and I'm like, but that's what we need. So you guys, trust me, man. We're in this together. Like, I'm glad you like the show, man. I'm honored, in fact, that you guys like the show. But I like what you do, and so I'm pumped to be here, man. I'm really happy that I learned that you guys had this chat. I didn't even know that Pinesap. I didn't know he even had a chat. I was like, what the heck, dude? I saw it was a comment section or something, because I know there's bots for that. And so I saw that today, joined in. A whole bunch of your guys came over to mine. You blew my admins out of the water. We have like a private admin chat stuff. And they're like, dude, Jeremiah, they're like, we've had like 20 new people today. And I said, yeah, speckzo and Pinesap. I said, that's what it is. So it was encouraging. So you guys are awesome, man, and I'm just really glad to be here.
That's awesome, bro. That's extremely humbling, because Michael Lofton and Flanders of Meaning of Catholic, I believe, and you and all these people or whatever have really like they basically saved me from going into like the sedevacantist atmosphere, basically, you know, and like allowing me to have some nuance and to really understand like what it means to submit to like the obedience of the church or whatever. So it really it is very humbling and awesome to know that you even know about who I am and stuff, you know. That's really great. So I appreciate that a lot. I do want to kind of call you out on something though and ask you a question though that maybe you don't want to answer for optical reasons, but you know, there's only a couple of people watching or whatever, so if you don't want to answer, you don't have to or whatever. But how do you what are you aware of concerning like the America First movement and like Nick Fuentes and stuff? Are you in support, or are you kind of like you want to avoid that stuff for optic reasons?
No, I get in trouble with my admins because I'm tolerant of it. Like I'm not a big guy watching any YouTube normally ever, right? I'm a guy who reads books for a living. So I read books, I get on YouTube, I do my show, and then I go back to Telegram, and that's like the main thing for me is the community there. So my apostolate is different. I don't talk to hardly any other YouTubers, not even Michael Lofton. I talk to him like maybe 4 or 5 times in my life. I'm on his channel, right, every week. So I didn't really know much about Fuentes, but I knew where, you know, I saw his, I remember hearing his speech early on when he was over at American Renaissance. And later, I watched a number of his shows for a while. I followed him for a little bit on Telegram, or not Telegram, on Twitter years ago. I was following him for a little bit, but I wasn't really there much either. I defended him and talked about him on my show on Holy Faith Media when he was going after Charlie Kirk and them and having everybody go to the colleges. I had a lot of friends that were against. They're like, who are these people coming in here? How dare they? I'm like, you're defending tranny gap there. Like, you know, a guy with tranny dating site. Like, you're a Catholic and you're seeing people with rosaries in their hands and MAGA hats on, challenging him on the global homo stuff. And you're siding with Charlie Kirk. Like, what's wrong with you? So I've never met Fuentes, never talked to him, but I've never had any opposition to him.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's...
No, that makes complete sense, and that's a very respectable position to hold, because a lot of people will just completely disregard them because of what's said about America First in the media, and you know, all the hearsay about like memes and humor that people just honestly just comes down to like a blatant misunderstanding of like the humor that Nick Fuentes uses and the use of irony and stuff like that. So the fact that you're having that type of nuance and understanding that there, you know, are like actually everybody pretty much in America First are really good people, and the majority of them are, you know, Catholics, and America First is really the only political movement, grassroots funded, that is pushing Catholic morality and has an opportunity to actually push the ball in our direction in terms of like temporal needs. So it is good that you have that nuance, because a lot of people that like we generally like and have like a lot of like the same commonalities between, they'll hear some rumors about America First or something, or hear something that Nick Fuentes said, or an edgy joke he made or something like that, and not really understand where that's coming from, and then basically just completely blanketly disavow it without like going really in depth into it. So I think that is a very awesome and mature, nuanced stance that you're taking.
Well, and you got to know something, man. So like, okay, so I used to be the leader. I was the founder and president of the Olivet College Young Americans for Freedom back when they were like, you know, Samuel Francis people. Okay. So I was raised on Samuel Francis and Pat Buchanan, Ross Perot. So I was MAGA before MAGA came around. I mean, that was just cool. And I was saying, you know, on the radio, on TV, I was even saying we got to make America great again. I was saying that kind of stuff for years. And was listed as one of the top 25 conservative student activists in the country by Leadership Institute, right, back in like 2008, and flew me down to DC and stuff. So I've been really at that place where, you know, edgy, right? And then also, I used to be a Proud Boy, right? What? So I was, what? To be honest, I never met any Proud Boy that I was able to talk to theologically, philosophically, politically. It's a beer club mostly, but you got to be fair, because most of these guys, they love America. right? They have a certain idea about what America means and what freedoms are. And they love beer and they love manliness and that kind of thing. And they want to bring it back. But they're also the kind of club that to get in, you have to yell at the top of your lungs, right? In public and give an oath. And then you got to get punched a bunch of times while you say cereal names. So you're not going to get a lot of like academically minded people in there. Like, you just aren't going to get it. So I was like a weirdo in that place. So anyway, and the last thing is, and not about them, that's enough there, is people may not know, but when I was doing 5 days a week, 3 hours a day, the first 45 minutes of my show was outrageous, like completely insane. I would take these articles like TikTok, and it was like reaction stuff, but I would sometimes make it like these are true stories. And it was big conspiracies about the great animal uprising of 2020, how the animals are figuring it out. They're part of the Great Reset. Dude, it was insane. And if people watched it and they'd never seen me, they'd think, dude, this guy's nuts. Like, is he being serious right now? And so I liked the meme humor. I had meme reviews at the end of my show. And so that was my style. In fact, I'll share in your chat, I'll share a video that I did where fat people hate. Shared it because I made a video in honor of them talking about this clown world's not healthy, and they liked it a lot. And so I'll share that with you because it gives you a sense of the gritty political. And I talked about Fuentes in a video about the fisticuffs and saying we've reached a point where unless we have an answer, there's going to be fights on the street for real. Like, it's getting the cold civil war, in my opinion, is bad enough. We're so divided that it's either repentance on a mass scale or it's going to devolve. I don't know how we can reform this. I mean, God, of course, is a God of miracles, but I'm very skeptical about traditional solutions. And I think that we're at a place that's really difficult to manage. And so anyway, but all that to say, it gives you a background as to why I'm not surprised that even Groypers would like my stuff if they're familiar at all with my political work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the fact that you told me that you've been watching me for quite a while let me know that you were more in the know than most people, or that you lead on to be. So I definitely consider you an ally. And I mean, even besides the political stuff, just your Catholic stuff, I definitely love what you're doing and stuff. I don't know if Pinesap wanted to ask you anything or say anything, but there's one thing I wanted to ask you that is not related to this at all. It's more about presuppositionalism, if you don't mind, because you've been talking about that a lot lately. So with Catholic presuppositionalism, do you think that the best course of action in debating Protestantism is to basically ask, like, by what authority do you have to be interpreting the Bible or whatever? Like, you think that is the best form of argumentation?
I think it is, in fact, the only. I follow St. Francis de Sales on it. He starts the book, or the letters, with an observation about scandal and the reasons that people have for walking away from the church and what kind of culpability they have, right? So he's addressing what kind of person he's talking to. Then he goes, and the very first chapter is, your pastors have no authority at all. He starts out to say you have no calling, and he breaks it down as to how it's impossible. And he uses something from that point forward, from the beginning onward, chapter 1. He uses what he calls the invincible argument. He says this is the invincible argument, and that all lines of argument, because there's so many people and so many arguments, he's going to take some general positions and he's going to drive them back to a central principle, a central point. That point later he describes as the invincible argument, and he says because the consequences are inescapable. And what it is this. We can argue, unlike almost any other passage, strangely enough, we can argue Matthew 18, the passage about if you got a problem with your brother, go to him. If you can't resolve it, get 2 or 3 witnesses. If you cannot resolve it, take it to the church. When the church makes a verdict, if one of those people does not accept the verdict, treat that person like a heathen and a tax collector. Most of the time, people have to go to Hebrew and Greek, and they try to say, well, if you look at the context and this, that passage, strangely enough, because it's ultimate authority for Catholics, it's not surprising that it's transcendental. You can argue that and say, okay, what model of ecclesiology is required if any other model at all. You can try all of these different models, but they all fail because you, in Protestantism, you are beholden to denominationalism. And they wouldn't care because none of them, number one, none of them claim to have the keys that bind anything in heaven and on earth, which means how could they treat me like a heathen? They might be able to in their little club over there, but all the other Protestant churches might not. That's why they can't really do excommunication anymore. It's impossible. They can excommunicate you from their club, but that doesn't say anything about treating that person like an unbeliever, because that would be a universal mark of Cain. You would go anywhere you go, you'd be the heathen. You'd be the person who defied the church. And if you don't have one church to make a ruling, you have to suppose that they'd be infallible. Otherwise, you could say, yeah, I don't trust the ruling. But Jesus doesn't say, if they make a ruling and you think it's a bad idea and decide not to submit to it, you should go back to phase 2 and debate it out in the Bible. Like, it's fake. It's completely fake. And so their ecclesiology, you can plug in any one of them. Zero work. Zero. The only one that works, it must have universal jurisdiction. It must have infallibility to make judgments that would be binding automatically. It would have to have binding in heaven and on earth, because you'd be saying that somebody is no longer, they're outside of the church at that point. They're considered an unbeliever, which has spiritual ramifications upon them. All of these things would be required for, and it'd have to be one church. You'd have to have one church to go to. It would have that. And Orthodox could say, well, we have that. And I'd say, no, because you have the same problem of, if one patriarch has a problem with another patriarch, what do you do? And I said, because you have it right now with Russia and Constantinople. And what is your answer? Bring it back to the church? Okay, that sounds good. Where is it? Oh, the people. Oh, that's neat. So why would we bring it to the church? Why not just bring our cause to all the people, whatever that even freaking means? I said, it's a joke, dude. Your ecclesiology is garbage, because you lack what St. Francis de Sales said is a center point of unity that has to be one. It must be one, because otherwise it's divided. Even the East admits the primacy. They just say first amongst equals, but they still can't get around first. They can't dodge it because it's inevitable. And so we are the only ones with that. But because that's true, any theological debate we have, St. Francis would say, well, let's take it to the church, boys. Every single time. Because if you cannot take it to the church, then you are not part of the church. If you say you're part of the church, but you don't submit to its ruling, you are now outside the church. So either way you cut that cake, it's over. And Protestants are stuck, because they'll say, well, I have a problem with you. Let's debate it out. And you debate Bible verses. And then you say, well, let's bring 2 or 3 witnesses. And so they do. And you say, okay, guys, let's go to the church. And they're like, well, no, let's just stick with the Bible. I'm like, but the Bible says go to the church. I know. But I think what we need to go back is back to the scripture. I said, you're stuck. You won't budge. They can arbitrarily, conventionally say that they can put together a canon with their magical eyeballs to say that, oh, yeah, I know that, Jude is definitely infallible. And you're like, okay, what if I say it's not? Like, they have no way to settle it, because guess what? If they say, no, it definitely is, I'd say, well, we've got a dispute. Let's bring it to church. We're right back there again, because ultimate authority is necessary. Without ultimate authority, you would not be able to settle disputes. And if you can't settle disputes, we would still be stuck with the Arian controversy. We'd still be stuck with the Donatist controversy, Montanist controversy, every controversy under the sun. And so he lays them to rest, dude. 72,000 Protestants returned to the Catholic Church because of his work.
Let's go.
Let's go. So I say, if people say, well, how should I debate Protestants? I'd say, with using the same method as the most successful Catholic apologist to ever convert Protestant people. And I did a 3-part series on it. Check it out.
It's awesome. So
you have this, you said a 3-part series. Is that on like a YouTube channel?
Oh, yeah, man. Yeah, I did it's part of my series on presuppositionalism, because his entire argument is presuppositional.
Your chat and your all your links, feel free to shill them in my chat and let people follow them.
Yeah.
But in summary, basically, Catholicism is inevitable, and the reason why is because it's not cool to shill for Protestantism. It's not cool to shill for sedevacantism. It's gay. All right,
dude. I have my final video in that series. So I had, let me see here. So Sedevacantism destroyed by St. Francis de Sales. I believe that the debate is over. I don't think that it's even, I think that we are wasting time if we continue down the road they want to talk about, because St. Francis de Sales destroys them. I encourage people to watch it and tell me for themselves.
But you do submit
also,
to Pope Michael, right, of Kansas?
Yeah, dude, I interviewed that cat on radio.
I just requested an interview with him.
Yeah. Did you really? Did you get it and talk to him on Facebook?
No, I sent him an email. I'm waiting for him to respond. I hope he does. I hope he comes on.
Let's see here. So here is the playlist for, yeah, here's my full catalog playlist on.
One of my favorite videos was the videos on sedevacantism, because you used to be one yourself, so you have a lot of experience with how they think, which is very flawed.
Pinesap,
totally.
Pinesap, did you want to, I know I've been just like talking nonstop. Do you want to ask any questions to Jeremiah?
I'm trying to think of any questions to ask Jer. I just kind of more wanted to say it was so awesome how you went off on Eastern Orthodoxy, because I think at this point, like, Protestantism is kind of like, I must say that, like, the era we're in is kind of in the post-Protestant debate where it's like I can go to Catholic Answers and pretty much debunk like any argument they're going to throw our way. But I think Eastern Orthodoxy is like the next thing that Catholic apologists really need to set their sights on. And I loved how Jared just like used Catholic presuppositionalism to just like own it like completely, because like you'll have all these EO apologists that are like, oh, well, you know, I don't know, this Pope didn't attend the council, you know, papal infallibility destroyed. And you're like, bro, Moscow is literally not a historical apostolic see whatsoever. And on top of that, y'all aren't one church. I don't care how much you cope. Like, you're not one. You haven't been one since you broke off Rome, right? And so for you to go off like that, Jared, was awesome. I think more people need to hear that.
Yeah, I have my Sedevacantism videos in there. So I have the one I just shared in the chat called Sedevacantism Destroyed. The one before that, or the one that's called Catholic Apologetics Debating Protestants with St. Francis de Sales. Or sorry. Powerhouse Apologetics Against Heresies. That one is, I'm going against, so I'm using a book written by a guy who was an Orthodox priest talking about St. Irenaeus using presuppositionalism as a method to deconstruct the enemy on their own claims and then do construction contra error, and then to use proof after that, once you've established your presupposition, your network, to then use proof, and those proofs make sense. So he does a good job with that. And then I was able to use that to that his system as an Orthodox person does not suffice. And I think it's more than what I mentioned. I think it's also that he has this lingering Calvinistic kind of total depravity and noetic effects of sin that make it that natural law is unable to be done at all, or natural theology. But yet he says that they suppress the truth of God for a lie. And the truth of God that he talks about is Romans 1, that through the creation, things are clearly seen and made evident to them, and that they're without excuse. And I'm like, but that means that they can do natural theology. Like, you're suppressing what you know. But then he says they can't know. It's so the cognitive dissonance is through the roof. But I said, but that also is the best, and maybe the best single chapter, because it's one chapter, that video. The best single chapter on anti-Protestant and anti-Reformed presuppositionalism that I've ever seen, ever. It demolishes it, and he's using St. Irenaeus.
Based. I just want to say TLM Groiper has been listening like the entire time for the last 3 hours, and I'm pretty sure he used to be like one of the people that didn't like me, so I think I've won him over. So he's been listening to our chat for like 3 hours straight. That's awesome. But Jeremiah, I wanted to ask you a question. You said that you watched at least the first 2 episodes of Logos Triumphant, right? So you watched the first episode regarding race and Catholicism?
Yes. I talked to Pinesap about that earlier, yeah.
So would you say that we said anything that is, I guess, in error? Like, would you agree that it is perfectly okay to have some type of racial identity and want and appreciate your heritage and want what's best for your own people, as long as obviously you're not falling into racial idolatry or treating anybody cruelty. Would you say that there's anything wrong with that regarding Catholic theology?
No, yeah, you guys are good. You have a right to, and in fact, it's a biological default that the vast majority of people will be attracted to people that look like them. That's just a default. You can go anywhere in the world, dude. And it would be terrible, I think, if we went and we tried to make Mexico white. Dude, they'd flip out. If we went to Japan or Korea or India and we were like, oh yeah, we think you're a racist for trying to keep your country the way it is racially speaking, and your people and your culture and your traditions, they'd be outraged. And so would the white people, the white lefties in America that think that that's not a problem. They'd be like, all of a sudden, they'd be like, oh, how dare you? And so I think that everybody naturally, that's a bi thing, that's just who we are as people. It's a cultural thing. It's a religious thing. There's numerous dynamics to this. And the church has been perfectly fine with you loving your people. And in history, when they said that, you really were like, if you were in America or England or France, you were overwhelmingly white people. French, white people. British, white people. Like, that's just what you were. So when they say that, they're saying you're allowed to love your fellow British white people. Like, it's what they're saying. And I think it's a default anyway, because these groups that identify and say, oh, there's no such thing as whiteness, yet they blame whiteness. And they say there's no such thing as white, and yet they're constantly saying cancel white people or kill all white people. So, and not only that, but if they all go in their own groups, so let's say you got an Asian group over here, and you got La Raza over there, and you've got the black, nationalism over here, and everybody, let's say they all kind of hunker down in their own little racial categories. Dude, there's gonna be a lot of white people just chilling, looking at each other, being like, you look a lot like me, actually. And we're being told by all these other groups, there's no such thing as white people. Let's abolish whiteness.
Yeah. So you would acknowledge that there's clearly, I guess, an oppression, or I guess an agenda, or whatever you want to call it, against white people, where they're basically being dehumanized in their own country, and that's obviously wrong against Catholic teaching. That white people are being told that like they're the epitome of evil and that they should be ashamed of their ancestors and stuff like that. Like you don't see anything wrong with speaking out against that, right?
White people are enduring something that, in my opinion, is satanic. I don't just think it's bad. I think it's satanic. I think that it's natural, and at this point inevitable, you will see an increase of people who just have a greater awareness of themselves as a group that culturally there's enormous differences, right? I mean, I think that the idea of like culture distorters and cultural parasites that's put forward in the book Imperium, I think that there's a lot of truth to that, the way that it just plays out, that people can look at that, Francis Parker Yockey, and say, regardless of if they agree with everything he says or think he's kind of a strange guy, that regardless of that the idea of kind of the self-destructive nature in many ways of a lot of white people, like a self-loathing, sadomasochistic kind of attitude about themselves and their own people, I think that's true. And I think that we are in many ways doing to ourselves what no other group does to themselves, right? They're quite proud to be black, or quite proud to be brown, or quite proud to be Asian, or whatever they happen to be. They're quite proud, in fact. And yet, for some reason, white people are generally forbidden from being proud, forbidden to appreciate their ancestors, and are basically told that they have a kind of original sin, that there's no way they can get it off. They're stuck with it. Their kids are stuck with it, and maybe they should abort their kids or not have kids because it's terrorism to have a bunch of white kids in a family. How dare you? And that's just we're being overwhelmed by it at every level of society, culture, politics, economics, big business, you name it.
I'm gonna say this to someone that's like Latino. I definitely like notice that, like, well, those who are of European ethnic backgrounds, like, there's definitely like some suppression going on. Like, you guys are told you cannot advocate for yourselves, and I even saw an event on my campus called "Decolonize Your Dating Scene," and it showed like some white guy with a brown beard. I'm like, bro, what the fuck is this crap? Like, it's just like so surreal. Like, pull that shit with Asians or Hispanics or another group, you're gonna get shit on. But do it with the whites, and it's a-okay, I guess.
Also, I would say that I would point out, if you look at in-group bias in between a lot of people, and you see this category of like,
Yo, boys.
you notice that the in-group biases of other groups like blacks, Asians, Hispanics, etc., they're all pretty high. But when you look at the one group of white liberals, it's like they're biased against themselves, and like that's not natural. That's like 60 years worth of social engineering and programming and anti-white propaganda. And then they have an entire swath of the voter base that want to literally masochistically destroy themselves for people that hate them. And it's disgusting, it's sad. And you know what I say, I'm not even fully white, but I'm half white. But when I see Starbucks barista with a Black Lives Matter thing once, I said to the barista, and I said to the people around me, I said, hey, white lives matter too. Because I was talking about, I mentioned that one girl who was kidnapped and I think killed in, what was this? I think she was killed on a road trip. I mentioned her name. I said, that white lives matter too, and I said, I'm not afraid to say, it's okay to be white, frankly, and I think that, I think
it's okay to be white, so called. Jesus,
yeah.
I remember that.
Robert Harris is the author of Imperium, right?
No, Francis Parker Yockey.
Parker, okay. Yeah, because
he was kind of a Wignat, but he had some good points about some of the issues. He actually, weirdly enough, kind of has a little bit of a pro-Catholic bent to some of his writing in the book when he says like all of Europe was united around the Pope,
based
and like depicting that as a good thing. And I was like, that's kind of awesome, actually.
Man,
Also, I think Jared dropped from the
he
chat.
left. Well, all right, it's all right. Big respect to Jeremiah. We love him. He is awesome, and he just completely removed any doubt. Not that I had any doubt, but he just completely removed any doubt that I had that he is 100% our guy and just a complete ally. And he makes awesome Catholic content, and everybody should follow him. He's Paleocrat. He is featured. I think he has his own channel as well, but he's also featured on Meaning of Catholic and Reason and Theology.
Oh, Jer's actually back now. Jer's back in the chat.
All right, I'm going to let you guys talk for a second. I just got to go pee for real quick.
Oh, you got it, bro.
But it's crazy.
Dude, I need to see Jer at AFPAC 4, man. I need to see both Jer and Angela and all the Bannisters in tow and stuff like that. That would be so awesome.
It's crazy that Jeremiah's been around the political sphere for a while. Like, he's not just some new guy. He's been around. He was even, I'm pretty sure, wasn't he part of CRMI, the main Sedevacantis organization?
I want to let Jared speak to that, but by what I remember, Jared did say that. Oh, there he is. Oh, I think you're muted, big guy.
All right, there we go.
There we go.
Yes, because for some reason, man, my internet was not making it upstairs. Oh, come on, dude. I just got first day of LGBTQ plus Pride Month on my phone. I'm like,
It's Sacred Heart of Jesus Month, silly.
Man.
Jeremiah, quick question. Bro. You used to be part of the CRMI group, right?
The CMRI. Yeah. I was confirmed by Bishop Pavronis.
Oh, how was your time being there? Like, how was it like being part of that organization?
It's kind of weird, man. Like, on the one hand, right, for you to even land in that world, you're in a dark place, to be quite frank. And it's like a certain style of person who even finds themselves like looking up Sede stuff. You're typically probably conspiratorial in general, like your worldview is very conspiratorial. And you have a certain proclivity to enthusiasm and things like that. So it's like a certain kind of person you're going to be surrounded by. There's not a great diversity of personality types inside. But it was one of those things where on the one hand, you felt that it was really powerful because it's all old right everything, man. It was, the mass, although they did the post reforms of Holy Week and everything, which there's a big debate in Sedevacantism about that. And so, but we did those. But we drive about an hour to get there in the winter and stuff, sometimes an hour and 20 minutes just to get there. And there'd be maybe 15 people. in the whole place, and it was always insane. It was always a little crazy. We had the police there one time to get some of these diamondites out because they kept coming in and were passing out literature. Like, so they had to call the cops. No. People, diamondites, like people who are down with the sickness, right? So so they have major divisions. And then we got my wife, she ended up reading, she ended up going to go see the movie of our cousin's wife was like, hey, I'm going to go see Twilight. Is when it first came out, right? And she's like, will you go with me? And my wife's like, I'll go with you. So she went. Well, she posted on Facebook, I went to go see this movie with my cousin, my cousin's wife. Dude, she contacts me like an hour later and says, Jeremiah, you have to help me. I'm like, why? And she goes, people have lost it. They're like, they are literally mad at me because I went to go see Twilight. So I'm thinking, well, because it sucks or something? Like what is it that they're mad about? No, you got to see it. So I go in there. Dude, they're mad because I'm talking like maybe 25 different cities, right? From all over the country. Because it was the Diamond Brothers had the most viewed stuff because they did documentaries. But in the YouTube apologetic world, I had #1 videos in my category, dude, back then. It was small. There weren't big name people weren't there. Institutions weren't there. So out of all the YouTube apologists in the Catholic world, there was no question that my videos at that time were the most watched and resourced of all. I had #1 videos multiple times. You only needed like 15,000 views, and you're like #1 in the people and blogs category, whatever. So like you didn't have to be big. Nowadays it'd be like chump change, right? So, so I was known, and so I had all these people, studies, and they're all in there, and they were mad at my wife because she's encouraging the changing of details about vampirism because vampires suck blood. And I'm like, what? And dude, I mean, they're mad, dude. They're like basically saying that she's scandalizing people. And I'm like, okay, break this down. I'm like, so you think it's scandalous, not that she went to go see a movie that's hot trash, but because the movie has vegetarian, vegan, meaning they eat deer blood and stuff. And they're like, yes, vampires, that's not what they do. And I'm like, vampires are fake. And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, I'm dead serious. I had tons of them. These are real people. We talked to them. They'd followed our work. They talked to us on the phone. We knew what churches they went to. These people were dead freaking serious. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening? So I go about a month later, I go into the church, and there's even fewer of them than there are SSPX, right? So if you're a Sede priest, you're like traveling a lot. You're traveling sometimes 6 hours, 7 hours, and SSPX does too sometimes to provide mass for people. Well, the Sedes will go to people's homes. So like they're like, oh yeah, we're just setting up mass in the house, or we got in the trunk. So they go to these homes, and they get to this place in Canada. Every Sunday, our priest would drive up to Canada to a family's house. And the family would thank him, give him some money and stuff, and he'd go back. Well, one week, this guy, and I had followed him. I'd seen him on Blogger. He had a Blogger blog. Nobody ever commented. I don't know if anybody even read it. You know, he hardly ever wrote. Well, but that's how I knew him, I guess. And my priest comes up to me after church one time, and he's like, hey, he's like, did you hear about what happened? And I said, no, what are we talking about? He's like, the guy from Canada. And I said, the blogger? And he goes, yeah. He said, he let me know. He said, he's not going to the mass. He doesn't want us to come up anymore for the mass. I said, he doesn't want you to. And he goes, well, he said that he found an Eastern Catholic church, and he's going to go there because their sacraments are valid. That's what the Diamond Brothers used to do too. So like, I know there's a lot of studies actually that will kind of sneak and do that kind of thing. Hey, because the sacraments have never changed.
Do Sede Vacantes have valid sacraments?
Yeah. Well, it depends. SSPV unquestionably valid. Unquestionably. Anything through Lefebvre at all, anything through Demer is valid. Anything through Archbishop Took, you are now in the world of cuckoo bird, crazy town, weirdos. Like the Palmarian Church, that bishop that's the Pope guy over the Palmarians, he's a Took guy. The dude who was the co-founder of the Order of the Solar Temple or whatever, the cult, the death cult. It's like 70 people got shot in 3 different places.
Oof.
That guy was made a bishop by Took. There was a dude in England who was not even a Catholic, and Took later said he knew he wasn't a Catholic, but consecrating a bishop made him Catholic. Dude, so at that point, he's not even in his head. He was doing consecrations in garages, dude. Like there was no verification for all this. Well, that's the majority of priests and bishops in Sede land.
Does Pope Michael have valid sacraments?
It'd be speculative. I don't think that his is through that line at all. I think he's probably through the Tuck line too. Most of them are, unless you're with the SSPV, which does not believe anyone should go to the CMRI or anywhere else. They're kind of the elitists, right? They like it. There's an SSPV around because they all came from the Society of Pope Pius X.
But would you mind explaining that even these SSPX and Sedevacantists who may have valid sacraments, that it's not licit and that people shouldn't receive sacraments for them unless it's under an emergency circumstance?
Yeah. So for Sedes, I don't even think that would be permitted even in emergency. In part because you would be allowed to go to an Orthodox church if you had no mass at all around. If you're living out in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in Russia, dude, and there's no Catholic church as far as the eye can see, and you have no sacraments, you have to present yourself to them. They have to then communicate with Rome, and you have to get a special kind of indulgence to be allowed to go there, and they would know that you're a Catholic, and you would know that you're only there for certain sacraments, and it's super rare. I mean, there's enough Catholic churches that doesn't happen. But they recognize the Pope as the Bishop of Rome. So they don't say that he's the Pope as in the way we say it, but they say, oh, yes, he's definitely the Bishop of Rome. He's definitely the Pope in that regard. Sedevacantists, on the other hand, no. Sedevacantists go further. If it's, to them, the ordinaries, there's 0 ordinaries at all for them. They have no ordinary powers at all, and they admit that they don't. So I don't even think with that regard. Same thing, though, with the SSPX. I think what makes it different with them is that we have a really generous, fatherly Pope who, in the Year of Mercy, said that he will give them indefinitely certain faculties back on a condition, and that condition is that they continue with goodwill. He says, I trust him that with goodwill, they will continue to strive for a fuller communion with the church. I don't believe that they've lived up to that at all. I think, yeah, no way. So it is conditional, but unless he revokes it, and I don't think he will, I think that they're in a funky place as almost even in God's wisdom, because I have to believe over time that the ecumenical dialogue we have with the East is going to be increasingly productive. We've already seen that it has been. It's why Russia's ticked off right now. It's why the Great Council is so confusing to Russia and the Ortho Bros over there, because they are sounding way more Catholic. Their Great Council has certain positions regarding baptism and other things that are way more like us. And our Vatican II addresses things to do with them as well as things to do with the Eastern Catholic Church. So we've both been doing better about getting closer and closer. And I think I pray there comes a day when the East gets close enough that they will be considered in an irregular status, an irregular communion, that it's not a normal full communion. It's a kind of partial thing where certain faculties are granted to show goodwill, to show that, yes, you've made progress. Yes, people can go. We want you. That's a benefit because we believe you're drawing closer. And as long as that's happening, our people being involved with you makes that unity stronger. And I think that that's what they've done with the SSPX. I think, though, so if people, the reason why I would say not to go is not because they can't, because the Pope has said they can, because they have the faculties at least for those things. What the reason why I would say they should not, and why it's in fact scandalous to do it, is because number one, normally every person that does it has to leapfrog over about a bazillion parishes that are in full communion with Rome that they haven't even looked into. They are determined that that's just the system they want. And that's normally a disordered thing going on with them. But also I would say it's because in secret, that's part of your pitch to people, that are connected with parishes, that are connected with the FSSP, your pitch to them is that the Pope has released that the excommunications were lifted, except for Lefebvre, that the others were lifted, and that the faculties are now provided. And I said, but were you guys like doing those things before? And I knew the answer already. He goes, oh, well, yeah, obviously. Yeah, totally. And I thought, that's schemester slimeball talk. But it's true. They know it. They know it's true. They do that stuff in private. They do it anyway. It doesn't matter what the Pope says. But then they use that as if it's like, look, guys, you're welcome to come in. And then you get in there and they're like, oh, yeah, it was wrong that they ever denied it. We didn't really believe it. We've been doing it the whole time anyway. I'm like, that is serious slimeball stuff. But so to me, that's the kind of thing. And that they're a negative system that grows in the same way that most Protestant churches do. And that's not by new conversions, but by a church hopping effect. And that church hopping effect, you lose a pastor in your place, or a pastor scandal happens, you go over, shuffle your way over to a different church. It's got a new worship leader. And all of a sudden the pastor thinks God's blessing the church like crazy because there's a whole bunch of new members. All the while, those people have all been Christians their whole life. They're only there because of some scandal over here. And for the SSPX, they call that the Francis effect. And I was there, by the way, when Bishop Fillet, I wasn't even going to church at the time. I had a lip ring, a nose ring, long hair. And I was out with my buddy. He took me out to go see the SSPX. He was trying to get me back in to the church. So he took me out of the SSPX to their, I think it was Minnesota or something like that, or Wisconsin. But we went up there, beautiful place. And as we saw their ordinations that year, and that's the year they had a guy they were ordaining conditionally. And the conditional ordination was that dude was, he was already ordained. He was a priest in a parish, defected from the parish system, joined the SSPX, and they're going to redo the ordination. That is way bad. So Rome sends a letter under Benedict. And I'm there. I'm the only journalist there. They had signs, don't record, signs, don't take pictures. I totally was doing that. And but he rips it up. He rips up the letter right in front of everybody. Rips it up. And I said, scumbag. This guy's a scumbag. You take me here to get me back into the church. This guy rips up letters from the popes? Some clandestine thing here? Ordaining a guy who's already been ordained? What are you smoking? So I'm like, it's scandalous. So it's not, their sacraments, to that extent that they've been released, are licit and valid. So you can go.
Wait, you're saying the SSPX are both licit and valid?
The sacraments that were released and afforded them, that the Pope said during the year of mercy that he will allow that indefinitely, those things would be allowed, including the idea of paying tithe.
Wow.
So there are certain things that you'd be allowed to do, but that doesn't mean just because technically they have the right to continue and function, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should, in fact, go there. So you can say, I have the right to eat a whole bunch of food right now. Just shove a bunch of food down my throat. I have the right to do that. Is it wise for me to do that? No. Is that bad for my health? Yes. Is it bad for your health to go to the SSPX? By and large, it's bad enough that even in a subtle way, they will say things like, people will say, yeah, I'm a parishioner over here, or I'm a member of the SSPX.
From what I've heard is that it is valid, like their sacraments and attending SSPX mass is valid, but it is illicit because they have no canonical status. So you're saying that it's both valid and licit. So that kind of has to change my entire argument of like why people shouldn't go. Like, well, if it's valid and licit, then what is stopping me from going?
Scandal. And so that's the whole point, is that you can be valid, you can be licit. And remember, it's licit within a novel construct. The novel construct that the church has created is the idea that it's kind of an imperfect communion, right? That it's not full, but that it's partial. And I think that that's because through the years, and that's why they lifted excommunications for the ones who were involved, right? So there are numerous things that they've done that gradually, incrementally draws them back in. And in that process, the church has been gracious. And gradually over time, as they've shown goodwill and continued to engage in that. But here's the thing, and here's where this reveals the heart of it and why it's scandalous to go, is because they will, if you ask, it was a time where it seemed like they were really close to signing documents and becoming this kind of thing like Opus Dei almost, that they, it was an interesting thing, a category that they'd be in, and it fell through. Well, the problem was they have a paper, they have a document, and they're about to sign this document. And they said, well, we have one last question. They said, what if we have a disagreement over the interpretation or application of said document? Who does it go to? Like, who decides that? And they said, well, the Pope. That was the end of it for them. They said, no. Said, no way. And I said, schismatic. I'm like, dude, you at that point, that is where the buck stops. I'm sorry. We're Roman Catholic. It does stop there. You don't take it and say, well, I disagree with the Pope. I'm going to make up my own rules. In fact, let me just remind everybody and them, because they're always saying that they complain about Vatican II because there was no charitable anathemas, is what they say. So right here, Session 4, Chapter 3, Section 9, Vatican I. So then, if anyone says that the Roman Pontiff has merely an office of supervision and guidance, and not the full and supreme power of jurisdiction over the whole church, and this not only in matters of faith and morals, but also in those which concern the discipline and government of the church dispersed throughout the whole world, or that he has only the principal part, but not the absolute fullness of this supreme power, or that this power of his is not ordinary and immediate, both over all and each of the churches, and over all and each of the pastors and faithful, let him be anathema. Anathema. And I said, if you think that the Pope does not have the absolute fullness of power, supreme power of jurisdiction over the whole church, over faith, morals, discipline, and government, both ordinary and immediate, over every church, pastor, and faithful member, you're anathema. And the SSPX in that moment revealed that, in fact, they were unwilling to grant that that was his role in the recourse that the church has in trying to settle a dispute. Wow. Anathema. So, yeah, I'd say you can't go to them for I would strongly discourage anyone from going, strongly, for a lot of reasons. They cast suspicion on the Pope. They refuse to commune with the Pope. So, yes, is it valid? Yes. Is it licit? Yes. For the most serious situations, like in Canada, where you got to get the jab to even get sacraments, yeah, at that point, probably, right? But if you're in America and you drive an hour, I will ask you, have you done a radius around in a big circle from your house, the same distance as it takes you to get to the SSPX, and tried to find churches within that radius all the way around that would give you what you're looking for? And most of the time it's not. They just jump ship and they're done. And in that regard, they're enthusiasts because they no longer commune with their fellow co-religionists. They do not commune because they cast it as suspect. And that's what I told Kennedy. I said, because Kennedy tried saying in a debate we had, dialogue, that he, on Me of Catholic, that he said, well, he said, we're both selling coffee, dude. It's like, you know, one's over here, one's over there. And I said, but yours is in a jurisdiction that is juridically under a bishop. And to have a chapel, he said, well, it's not a parish, it's a chapel. I said, but they number one, they call themselves members. They can't be. The only members are the priests and religious involved in the third order. The other one is they call themselves parishioners. They call themselves members. And even a chapel, you have to have the bishop of the area has to consecrate that place as a sacred space for you to do mass. So I can't just have a priest come in my house and just roll up and start doing mass here. Like, I can't do that. So you have to have recognition for the same reason that you did back in the 2nd century with St. Ignatius of Antioch. That's why you can't do anything apart from that. You had to have a kind of letter, right, that indicated that the bishop recognized that altar. You couldn't have that because otherwise, guess what that was called? That's called schism, because that's the earliest definition of schism is a rival altar. That's the earliest definition we have. So if you have a rival altar, and he said, well, we're not rival, we're both, selling coffee. And I said, you're saying that our coffee is possibly not coffee, that it might be poisonous, and that the people who are making it are scoundrels that hate people and wish they die, right? They're all sorts of messed up. And that the baristas themselves might not be real baristas. I said, dude, that's not competition. That is slander. I said, that's libel. It's malicious. And I said, and it's the church. It's you versus the Roman See. Like, dude, 0 people in history who've taken that position against the Roman See have won. 0. None. If you say the Roman See has defected, that it's not immutable, that they have the popes have contradicted, the councils have contradicted, Rome has lost the faith, dude, that is line for line the Diet of Worms with Martin Luther. Line for line. The Rome has lost the faith. The popes have contradicted. The councils have contradicted. That's what he said at the Diet of Worms. So I'm like, you guys are echoing wicked bad junk. You have Martin Lutheritis big time, and you need to get it. You got to get it worked on. And so like, so there's multiple reasons why to discourage people from going, even if the church in her generosity has, knowing that there are some people who will inevitably be going anyway, and that many of them are not malicious themselves, that they, in graciousness, in a year of mercy, that Papa Francis said, indefinitely, I am granting this, only on the condition that you be of goodwill and continuing to want to reach a greater fullness with the church in your communion. So I follow him on it.
That was a great segment. My goodness, man, you go very deep with your theological talks and stuff. It's fascinating. I love it. It's great. You're welcome.
Yeah. I've thought about going back to school for it, actually, because I have my degree in journalism and mass comm, and my minor is political science, and I went to school for theology, but I was a Protestant, and I went to Bannister Theological Seminary to study. It's a Protestant seminary, but I went for presuppositional apologetics and theonomic law and ethics. So I studied like the Old Testament case law to see the underlying principles that could be applied to modern day political economic situations and stuff. And so that was my field of study.
Yeah. It's very annoying how smart you are. But when did you become Catholic?
2006. I was debating Catholics, dude. In fact, I was asked by Michael Lofton to fill in for him as the host of the consecration of Russia and Ukraine in the world. So we live streamed it, and I led that. And there was a scene in there, I started crying because I realized in that moment that it was that statue. It was that statue that started the whole thing, because that statue found its way to Battle Creek and it was in the newspaper. And I was so irate. I said it was idolatry, that these people are idolaters, that the Virgin Mary was a sinner. She wasn't a virgin, all these things. And I wrote about it online and on Zanga back in the day. And over the next year and a half, I was bumping out articles, and I had a TV show, local TV show. I had a local radio show. So I was like all over the place talking against Catholicism for about 18 months. And the Christmas Eve of 2006, I went to a mass for the first time as a Novus Ordo. And I'd gotten, because I'd already read DeSalle's book, and it was at that moment I could no longer be a pastor. I said, I can't in good conscience continue this. I have no holy orders. This is so overwhelmingly convincing. I have nowhere to run. I have nowhere to hide. I can't do what I went to school for. I was like depressed, almost suicidal for a while, because all these years and money and everything, my whole dream and everything was gone. He destroyed me. And so I was toast, and I came into the church, and I wrote about it, and I was already getting like 75 different individual people commenting every day under my blog. So it'd be like, 150 comments a lot of times, right? So you'd have like 75 different people making comments and stuff. And when I converted, Scott Hahn called my phone in like a matter of about a week.
Scott Hahn
called my phone.
Wow.
Yeah, Scott Hahn. Scott Hahn is the first person to know, because I declared that I was becoming Catholic, but I still had not walked away. I started to separate. I wasn't taking communion at my church anymore. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't be Protestant anymore, and I knew I wanted to be Catholic, but I didn't know. I was still figuring out how. So he called me, and he was the first person I talked to on my last day at a Protestant church, and his wife was the second person to know that my son was named Athanasius. So yeah, he called my phone while I was at school, and he's like, is this Jeremiah Bannister? Yes. He's like, this is Dr. Scott Hahn, and I'm like the writer. I'm like, insane, what? And he goes, yes, because he used to be a Calvinist too.
I just started,
and he was into. Dude, he's a cool guy, man. Like, he's kind of the grandpa at this point in his life, right? He's like the grandpa theologian guy that used to be more normie, but now he's like getting hardcore about like the Latin Mass and stuff, and he's talking about it a lot. And so he's kind of changed up things. He's gotten a little bit more hardcore. And he invited me down to stay at his home for 2 weeks. And he wanted us to come down there and to spend 2 weeks to see Franciscan University, to get an idea for it and a feel for it, to see if that's where I wanted to go. Because he's like, look, your material is awesome. Your stuff on Sedevacantism is awesome. Calvinism is awesome. And we think that it'd be really cool if you came. So I was going to do that. And it fell through in part because I wrote a blog about the Jews.
Let's go.
Yeah, dude, it was. And then Mark Shea wrote something about me. And it said, Paleocrat, flip over a rad trad, find an anti-Semite. So I wrote one back called No Way, Mark Shea, and just railed on him. So, but that kind of got me in trouble with some people, and they're like, I don't know if I want to get too close to this guy. But I have pictures with Scott Hahn, and my daughter, and so yeah, we met him, got to hang out with him for a little bit. Yeah, so that was interesting.
So you were like a Protestant pastor before you were Catholic? Like you were like a legit like giving sermons at like a Protestant church?
You can watch it on YouTube.
What?
You can see highlight clips of me. Dude, I was real heavy back then, man. I was like about 50 pounds heavier than I am right now. But you can see me. I was preaching against infant baptism at the time. But I was also talking about the need for a creed and a catechism of some kind, because I knew the inevitability of, your creed. Even if you say we have no creed, that's your creed. Like you can't get around it. It's an inevitable thing of group dynamic. Wow. So I was talking about it, and so I was in this church. You can see me when I took the church. There were 8 people. They brought me in as an evangelist because they knew that they'd heard that I'd done you can get people pumped up and stuff. So they brought me in. They said their church was dying. Dude, I didn't realize they had 8 people, homie. And it was 2 cars in the parking lot. And one was a minivan because the pastor, who was like 69, dude, he would drive up to the elder care home and get like Edith and Esther and Maud and stuff and drive them into the church. And so I'm like, look, and I'm like, dude, they're like in their 80s. I said, this church is actually dying. I thought he was saying that it's just getting small. I'm like, dude, it's getting small and they're old. And they didn't have like any music. So he had a CD player in the front, and he did the most like old man thing in the universe. He'd say, I remember when I was a young boy, my grandma would take me down to that little brown church in the Vale. And then he'd push play. And it was Andy Griffith, Little Brown Church in the Vale. And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, this is real. So he offered me the job. I did 3 days of revival services, and they asked me to take the job, and I did. And within a matter of about a month and a half, I'd baptized for the first time baptisms, 14 different people. Wow. I would go in the streets. I'd actually go and talk to like drug dealers and people. Like I'd go right where they needed it. I'd say, I'm going to go right there. So I would, and I brought people in. We went from having 8 people who were all 69 and older, and we had about 60 people within 2.5 months. We had about 60 people, and our youth group had about maybe 18, 20 at times. And so you can see me doing Sunday school, youth group, and Wednesday night and Sunday mornings. And I preached every Sunday morning except for once a month. The senior pastor did, because I was taking over, but he was transitioning out. And so I every Sunday morning but one, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night, and I did Sunday school every Sunday morning, and I did Wednesdays or Thursdays I would do like a youth event and stuff, and so I did stuff like that. So I was very busy.
That's so awesome that like you were a Protestant and now you're like one of the prominent online Catholic apologists. That's so cool. I wanted to ask you real quick, are you aware, because we were talking about this before, and both Pinesap and I...
It's really nice to meet converts, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, when we went back to Mass, because I was an atheist, my road is ridiculous. right? I'm a product of a secular age, of an interdenominational family that believed kind of this Count Zinzendorfian crap that's like, you know, we're all really one church on the fundamentals. You're like, we need unity, man. Like, this is one faith, one Lord, and baptism, and all the denominations are like, yeah, we're our own thing. And so, but I was evangelifish, man. I was like all over the place, and so that was how I was raised, and so it was really easy for me to become discontent with one thing and kind of feel like I could hop to another. And eventually, after sedevacantism, I became just, it's really scandalous, man. And I never finished saying this. I'll say it really quickly because it's the end of the story with the sedes, is that, remember the thing about the Canadian guy, right? The blogger. Well, the priest asked me, he's like, so do you think they got to him? And it's just the two of us in the chapel, right? And I'm like, what? And he's like, do you think maybe, you know, they got to him? And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, the Vatican. And I was like, no. I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, he's in his house. You're driving 6 hours to a guy's house in Canada. And he's like, maybe he wanted information about us. And I'm like, nobody went to his website. I don't think anybody knew he barely existed unless you lived by him and stuff. And he's like, you never know. And dude, his eyeballs like got real big. And I'm like, I need to get out of this place. Like, this is a hellscape. I need to bounce. So I did. I got out, dude. I'm like, this is cuckoo. This is the priest. He's been in the CMRI a long time. He's a loon bird. So we end up leaving for a bunch of reasons, but that was one of them. And but it was hard for me to get back into the church. I tried. I made some videos against sedevacantism. The Diamonds made 2 videos against me. Put me on their old list of their index of forbidden trads. I used to be on that. And then after that, I couldn't accept the things that were going on. So I tried going to a regular parish. I tried doing these things, and I was like, I can't handle this, dude. There was no group like the Wolfpack Chat or like this Catholic Hangout or Pinesap's channel. Nothing like that. There was a community of people that could help individuals who find themselves at the brink. And so I was just floating alone, and I stopped going to church and became eventually an atheist. I just was no longer going, and started just imagining that, what if God wasn't real? What if this is all a fake? Because I couldn't be a Jew. I couldn't be a Muslim. No. The idea of like, oh, I'm going to go join the Mormons or something. I'm like,
what do you hate
like,
Jews? What is going on?
Yeah. That's the thing. So like there's a lobby. It's real. So the thing is that these I couldn't believe any of those things. It was an all or nothing. To me, Catholicism alone saved normative ethics. It alone saved an epistemology, but yet it was seemingly not real anymore to me. So what does that mean? Absurdism, relativism. I'm stuck in this wicked place that's meaningless. I open my eyes. I live in this weird world, and I'll close them, and it's done. It's over. So I fell away, and I was away for 7 years. And it came back on again, interestingly enough, against my will. My kids wanted to go, and we went, and it was 2017 on, again, Christmas Eve. So 11 years after the first Christmas Eve mass the first mass I ever saw was a Christmas Eve mass. And we go back after all these years. It's an hour and 20 minutes away from the last church we ever went to that was Catholic. And when I went in there, I am sitting there, and it's beautiful inside, man, gorgeous. And I'm like, whoa, this is weird. I get in there, and all of a sudden I hear gling, gling, and I'm like, oh, okay. So we all stand up, and I'm kind of looking around. And then the choir starts singing this Gregorian chant. And I'm like, what? And then I see all the altar boys walk by, and they're not like girl altar boys. They're like real altar boys. And they're wonderfully vested, right? They're looking great. And they come walking by, and I'm like, dang, son, like, what's this? And then I smell the incense, and I'm like, holy cow. And I look in the middle of the aisle, and they come through. Here comes the priest. It's the priest that I had before I became a sedevacantist, who gave me the book Enthusiasm by Ronald Knox and told me to read it, and I never did. He worried for me and said, I think you're going a dark route, and I think you're going to become a sedevacantist, and you desperately need to read this book. And I didn't do it. And I saw him, and he saw me, and dude, our eyes, both of us went like, oh no, because I have, like, for example, behind.
Uh-oh.
Huh.
Oh no, Jeremiah! No. Jeremiah, come back!
Speak.
Well, before he comes
Okay.
back,
The
I gotta
Diamond
say.
Brothers
Oh, there,
took him
hold on,
out.
he's back. He's back.
Okay,
He's back.
Cheers
He's back.
back. Cheers back. Okay.
Well,
Okay, perfect.
that's the Our Lady of Mount Carmel that the priest gave to me, and it was from the sacristy, and I put it up there when I came back. I've carried it with me ever since. Even when I was an atheist, I still had it in my office. My friends thought I was a weirdo, and still went to Christmas Eve liturgy, but it was always Orthodox and stuff. But he calls me in his office, or in the sacristy, and somebody came up and said, "Hey, man, Father wants to talk to you." Father Sirico, that's Tony Sirico, Polly Walnuts, that's his brother. Okay, so
The actor
Robert
from The
Sirico,
Sopranos?
yeah, he was Robert Sirico. Robert Sirico he's been on Timothy Gordon's show a bunch of times. I connected him with Timothy Gordon, and he's been on there talking about like parables and economics and stuff. He's more free market than I am, but I'm more
based on your part, not on his part.
Thank you. Yeah, totally. And so, yeah, we've had our disagreements on that. But he was actually going to be. He was offered the job by the Sopranos to be the priest in the show, and the bishop said he would allow it, but Father Sirico said no, and said, "But I will, however, offer to teach whoever's going to be your confessor on this, the priest. I will teach him how to do confession properly." So even the structure is the same one that we have at the church. It's the same thing. It has the purple, all the way that he's vested, the way that it's said back and forth, the whole thing. He taught the Sopranos that traditional form of confession. So that's why it's so, when you watch it, it's different than a lot of other ones that are, you're like, that's not how it goes. That one, oh dude, they're strict because he trained them. And so, but anyway, so he was there and he came in and he's like, he said, "You're the last person in the world I thought I'd see her." Because he knew, he came and he prayed over my daughter when she had cancer. He was the only pastor, priest, cleric ever that came and prayed for her while she was alive.
Wow, is your daughter okay?
Nobody else. Yeah. And he was the only one, and he was not invited. And he came in with the godmother who was responsible for sending the ornaments, that the nativity scene pieces that inspired my kids to begin asking weird questions like, "Hey, Papa, are we Catholic?" With names, for example, like Athanasius, Ambrose Lewis, and Teresa Avila Lucille. That's really hard to say no. I'm like, they're like, "Are we Catholic, Papa?" And I'm like, So the thing is that he's there and he's like, "You're the last person I thought I'd see." And I'm like, "You are the last person I thought I would see. Like, I saw you, 8 years ago in a city an hour and a half away." And he's like, he told me, he said, "Well, welcome home, prodigal son." I was not back. In my heart, but my kids were. They didn't want to stop going, dude. And so I tried sabotaging them, like saying, "We'll go to the Latin mass," because I figured that they wouldn't know, because they don't know Latin, and it was a low mass. They'd get really bored and not want to go. Nope, they wanted to keep going. So I'm like, dude, I can't even sabotage you guys. And then eventually they're asking me, like my son Athanasius, he's like, "Papa, what are those people doing in that line over there?" I'm like, "They're taking communion." He's like, "Well, can I go up and do that?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Why?" And I said, "You got to go to, RCI, you have to go to First Communion and stuff." He's like, "Well, have you done that?" "Yes." "Well, why don't you go?" "Well, you got to go to confession." And he goes, "I think maybe you should do that." He didn't know what confession was, but he said that. And I went home and my wife, independent from me, said, "Jeremiah, I want to talk to you." And she said, "I really think at this point that we need to go to confession." And it was the same day. And we've never stopped going. And the first book I did a series on at Meaning of Catholic was Enthusiasm, which is the book my priest gave me and has become the defining marker of my apostolate. My work is the book Enthusiasm by Ronald Knox, and 20-part series on it. And it was, I wept because I should have read it before, but I did not. And it changed my life. And now it's changing a whole bunch of people. So like the sticker pack and stuff, it says enthusiast and it's got Hard Knocks Life. All those stickers of Knox and enthusiasm and all that, that's all rooted in the big yellow book. The Get Yellow Pill, that's the Yellow Pill Club. So that's what that is.
So awesome.
Yeah.
Is your
Such a great book.
so your wife is obviously Catholic too. I've seen her in your chat multiple times. She seems like a very nice lady. Do you think, was she more devout, or how was her journey compared to yours? Was she also Protestant and then became Catholic, or was was she Catholic, and or vice versa? How'd that go about?
She was raised Protestant in the same church I was, but we didn't know each other. We're like years apart, and so I'd already left and gone to Bible college, and she'd entered into youth group and stuff. So we didn't meet till years later, and we met in a bar because I was technically running away from this gay dude who was trying to get up on my junk, and I was like in my Navy uniform. Shortly after 9/11, I'm dressed in my sailor blues, right? My dress blues with the cape and stuff. And I'm ordering at this bar, and he's like, "Hey, sailor," and I'm like, "Oh my god!" And he was like stalking me the rest of the night. And so I told my buddy, like, "Can I like leave with you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm going up the road." So we went, and I saw this mega hot chick across the bar playing pool, and so we ended up hanging out. And we ended up 9 months later, we're married, right? And so we knew each other for 9 months. That's all. And we're coming up on our 20-year anniversary in November. So we've been married a long time. Had 6 kids so far.
Oh,
and so. She, I learned later, was not baptized. Her mom never baptized. They never got baptized. And she never really, she went to church because she had to, but she never really thought about God or, kind of committed her life to God or anything. So I led her to God, and I bought her first Bible and signed it to her, and she still has it to this day. And so I led her to God. And when I decided to become a Catholic, it was after a year and a half, and I remember the morning I told her, I went into the bedroom, it was in the morning, and I told her, I said, "Look, wake up." And she woke up, and I said, "I'm going to mass." And she said, "I kind of wondered if you were going to do that soon." And I said, "Well," I said, "you can use the car any Sunday. I don't care." I said, "I don't care if I've got to crawl on my hands and knees. I'm going to mass." I said, "I'm becoming a Catholic." And she goes, "Well, I'll go where you go." She's like, "You're my husband." She's like, "I follow you. I'm with you." And I was like, "I love you. And I'll tell you how mass went." And so I got in the car, I go to mass. And what's amazing, St. Francis de Sales is the one who ultimately was the one who kind of hunted me down, right? Came after me, pursued me, and just wiped me, just knocked me out, blam, and then brought me in. And I get there. And they're like, "Today is St. Francis de Sales." And I'm like, "What?" Like, I didn't know. I didn't have a calendar or a missal or anything. I had no clue that was the feast day of St. Francis de Sales. No clue. And then when Scott Hahn called me, Scott Hahn said, "Well, you're going to school for what?" And I said, "Journalism." And he's like, "St. Francis de Sales is your patron." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "Dude, what the heck?" And so it's like he's everywhere. Like he's all around. But that's so my wife, through that whole thing, my wife is one of those ladies, man, that's like C.S. Lewis. It was attributed to C.S. Lewis, if I remember right. This idea, they asked, your wife, right? Does she talk to you a lot about philosophy and theology and all this? And he made a remark that a lot of people think was kind of demeaning, but I don't. And my wife doesn't either. And it was, "Oh, no, but she knows how I like my tea." And I thought, to them, that's significant because it's such a central part of his day. And she's the one of all the people. She knows that thing about him, and she knows him in a different way than the world does with all of his books and his theology and everything else. That she's the home person that he's with at home, right? And my wife is that way. So my wife, if you say, "Do you follow Jeremiah's politics and all of his stuff?" She'd say, "Well, I agree with him when I understand." She's like, "But he's his own guy." And she's like, "But yeah, I'm the guy. I'm the one waking him up on Sunday saying, 'You got to get ready. We're going to church.'" She's the one, right, that's making sure the kids are ready for school. She's the one at the Sacred Heart that we go to, the classical education school we go to. It's awesome. Saint Maker School, big time. And so she's that woman, and she's a very pious, devout woman who's always busting my chops because I could be an even better dad or an even better husband, leading in a better way, more robustly, with things like prayer and other things that she's like, we should do this and we should do that. And it's a very humbling thing because I know she's right. And it takes people like that, because otherwise, if she was into my world, we'd just be talking about, essence and energies and stuff. We'd be like talking the circumcellions or whatever. And I'm glad that she's the one that's talking about those other things. And she is the one. She's amazing.
That's so awesome. Yeah, that's one thing I struggle with is like My wife is great. Don't get me wrong; she's awesome. But like I used to struggle with like, oh, why aren't you as interested in this as me? Why aren't you as devout as me and stuff like that? And obviously, I had a talk with my priest, and he basically told me that like you can't force your conviction or your faith on other people. You have to be the light for them, and they have to be attracted to it. And that's essentially what happened with Catholicism, with me, basically changing who I am because of the Catholic faith, and that attracted my wife to want to convert with me, you know. It's a great experience to be able to experience that with them. There was a question I wanted to ask you because Pinesap and I were talking about this before. Are you aware of the priest name? He's I guess he's semi-popular on Twitter. He's followed by a lot of Catholic priests on Twitter. His name is Reverend Nicholas L. Gregorius.
I've seen the name because it's an interesting name, but I don't know much about him.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just get your opinion. So I looked into him, and he is like a legitimate priest. He went through seminary, and he is a priest according to the Catholic Church. And his Twitter timeline is nothing. He's basically like a complete rad trad. And he posts things like, right now I can't think of a bigger joke than the Vatican II Church. He posts, someone joked, what's the most exclusively gay club in the world? The College of Cardinals. I mean, I don't really understand the Latin, but he says, when I reflect on the hierarchy of the Vatican II Church, the Latin adage corruptio optimum pessima comes to mind. To be honest, however, I think the adage should be changed to reflect the new Bergoglian reality. In other words, corruptio pessima. So what it seems like is that he is openly disparaging other clergymen as well as the Pope, and that seems to be something that not even like liberals like Father James Martin and the like do. And I just want to get your like opinion or your viewpoint on that, where like these rad trads are essentially openly mocking other clergymen, and like it blew my mind that somebody would like with this office would be doing that.
It's blasphemy. If you come against the Roman See, for one, I mention this a lot, and it's probably obnoxious to some people, but I love St. Francis de Sales. He's my favorite in the universe, and I follow in his footsteps with this. And I say he refuses the idea from the get-go that any source of scandal can be imputed to the bride of Christ, because the bride of Christ is guided by its head, and its head is Christ. So the idea, it would be that Christ himself was deficient in preserving her from being the source of scandal, right? In her general body, that you cannot attribute that. Can you say that a number of the people in the hierarchy are a bunch of scumbag perverts? Yes, you can. You can say that. But once you attribute it to Rome, or once you attribute it to the church, but for a priest to go out and begin doing that is violating what I think is the most robust, in-depth description, admonition, prohibition regarding how people need to behave when they see a prelate of any part of the hierarchy committing either a grievous sin or entertaining a point of doctrine that is deserving of censure. So in other words, heresy, right? So if they're out there talking about heresy, or if they're out there doing a grievous sin, how should we behave in regulating our thoughts and words and deeds to the divine constitution of the visible church, which no man can change? And that's from the encyclical called Christian Citizen. It's on it's Sapientiae Christianae. It's my Latin's terrible, but it's Christian Citizenship by Leo XIII, and he's citing Pope St. Gregory the Great, and he says that even if your judgment is correct, you mustn't do it, because you should not slay the bride of Christ with the sword of your words. That's number one. He's already guilty of that. I mean, there's no way that people look at that and don't think that he's literally slashing the daylights out of the bride. That's what he's attempting to do. And so it's already wicked bad. And it says that you would actually be doing something in pride to do that. And when you go on YouTube or Twitter or anything, and you're out there bashing the institutional church and the ordinaries of the church, and you're doing that, and you're allowing it to creep its way up to the top with the vicar, at that point, you really do fall into the category of, in the book Catholic Controversy with DeSales, where he says your calumnies, detractions, and railings are so frequent that he said, review your leaders' writings and take out from all of their writings anything where they're railing and calumniating the church, take all of those things out, and you'll find that they have nothing to say. In other words, they're so bored with theology, they're so bored with devotion, so bored with these things that they have nothing else but to say things that are throwing stones at the throne. And I say the same thing about, if you go on his timeline and were to do that, he'd probably have a very boring and very short timeline. And it's the same with most trad apostolates on YouTube. If you take out their railings against the Pope, if you go to the remnant and you take out all of the videos where it's like, I dare you, come at me, Papa Bergoglio. Like, you take out everything like that. Put up your dukes, Pope Bergoglio. You take those all the way out, and he has basically nothing anymore. He has nothing. His whole apostolate is that. And I said, that was the criticism of Luther, Zwingli, Calvin, and the rest of the gang, De Beza, all of them. So if you want to be with them, act like the remnant. You want to be like them, act like Taylor Marshall. You want to be like them, act like this priest on Twitter.
That's funny that you said that. Somebody was just asking about what your thoughts on Taylor Marshall was. But go ahead, Pinesap, sorry.
Oh, dude.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I wanted to give my best Michael Matt from the Remnant impression. He goes on, he's like in the catacombs or something like that. And he's like, Bergoglio today throws over some new tradition. Is this Vatican II church gonna stand the test of time? Like, it's always that. It's always that. And it's so goofy. And it's like they got into the whole like QAnon stuff, basically. And I mean, and the shame is like they have actually, if you look at their historical articles, they have some pretty good historical articles. Like, they're one for the you'll probably correct me, Jer, but the Solidatum Pianum, the group that was led by Umberto Benini under Pius X that like dealt with modernism in the church and stuff like that. It's a really good article. Like, it's not even like polemical or anything. It's just like very historical. Like, they bring up some really good like detail and stuff like that like you wouldn't be able to find in many other places. And I'm like, this is really good. Like, if they stuck to this would be an awesome group. But it's like every other day, it's some new article that's just scandalous and what have you. And it's crazy. And you see like Michael Matt with his book on like TIA, we resist you to your face, written under St. John Paul II's pontificate. It's crazy.
It's garbage. And it's a guy talking smack from a far ways away, dude. And he's guilty of stolen spiritual valor anyway. He's talking about being in the catacombs. The people in catacombs were literally on the outside of catacombs were being eaten by wild animals in coliseums. So you're a scumbag if you're somebody who can go in first class flights all over the world and do speeches and conventions and stuff, and then you LARP as an idea that you're somehow inside of a catacomb because it's a YouTube channel. Screw you, dude. Screw you. You're a liar. Like, you are stealing spiritual valor from people who literally put their lives on the line. You are not doing that. You're making a lot of money, and you're making a lot of money by calumniating the church. So screw you. Like, I don't mean to be too rude, but screw you. Like, literally, like, and Taylor Marshall, I'd encourage Taylor Marshall. Like, I think that the best way I could put it would be to say, like, he should treat himself, man. Like, for real. Like, he should treat himself to a weekend or something in a really fancy hotel. Get some nice Barry White playing, buy some candles, light up some Nag Champa incense and stuff, kind of put together a really warm, steamy bubble bath and just screw himself until the sun shines. Like, he should seriously screw himself. Yep. Like, the guy is a crypto sete who is, he's a crypto sete, undoubtedly so. It was amazing. The people, I lost followers for saying this. I started like 3 episodes just crashing down on him. And I'm like, they'd say, he hasn't said that he's a sedevacantist. And I'm like, so if I tell you, you say you're like pro-choice, and I say, no way. And you're like, you what do you believe? And I'm like, I believe like it's your body, your choice. And like the baby is just a fetus clump of cells. And like, nobody should get involved in your business. It's not your right to do that.
I wouldn't identify as pro-choice.
But I haven't said the word pro-choice.
Yeah.
Or I believe in tulip, but I've never said I'm a Calvinist. So what, dude? The substance is there. He says he's a suspicionista because he embraces the idea that all it requires is your personal suspicion to no longer do that. That's a Pandora's box, because if you take the position that it's even possible for that to be the case, it's in canon law that if a pope is a heretic, this is what would happen. Every single person who's written about that goes through a bunch of different theses about it, and then at the very end says, and I believe it'd be easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for that to happen. They all do, all of them. And it's because that would be true if that happened. If that happened, that would be true. But then they say, for that to be true, the Lord would have to fail on, number one, the Lord would have to fail on his promises. That's an obvious one. But the Lord would actually be guilty for sin. He'd be the creator of evil. And the reason why is because he tells us in our disputes to take it to the church. But if the visible church doesn't have an ordinary as a vicar at the top, and if it's not infallible in its rulings on faith, morals, government, and discipline in anything that pertains to the universal church, then he's commanding people to go somewhere that, in fact, for all intents and purposes, is a robber church, a fake place with no pope, no ordinary at all. You wouldn't even have the church to go to in that case. And he's telling people that's where you must go. That would make him either he would be ignorant of the not realizing, like, oh crap, I made a big mistake on that, or he's just simply unable to do anything about it, or so he didn't have the foresight, he's powerless, or he desires for you to go to a place that is fake, that is a robber council with a fake anti-pope at the top, with a bunch of apostate cardinals and a new church that's, an antichrist beast system church, all that. And he's telling us in our issues to go to that church. If that's true, God is the author of sin. In fact, he's the most responsible in all of human history, the worst, most responsible. And Francis de Sales says that is blasphemous to say. Consequently, it's impossible for that to happen. Impossible.
And every time that I call Taylor Marshall a crypto seed or do any type of criticism towards him, they're like, oh, well, you're being uncharitable. You're judging the intentions of his heart. And it's like, no, I don't claim to know what his heart is, whether he's doing it intentional. But his actions show that it doesn't seem like he's very genuine, because he's thrown out a bunch of accusations, and he does this like very sneaky thing where he's like, oh, I'm just asking questions. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but like, is the Pope a Masonic plant by Russian agents or whatever, yeah. Right? And it's like, okay, well, there's multiple Catholic channels that have refuted all of your arguments, and you just refuse to acknowledge them and act like they don't exist. So I'm not going to judge your heart. Maybe you do have good intentions, but from your actions, it does seem like you have that your intentions aren't good, because you're refusing to even acknowledge any other type of viewpoints that you have. And it seems like you are basically just doing this for clout, like you found like your source of income or your audience or whatever, and you know what they want, and you're basically just profiting off of that. And it seems like you're not really devoted to spreading the faith at that point. You're basically just trying to spread an agenda and profit off of that.
And you just bashes the church. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. Also, another thing about Taylor Marshall, he shills Archbishop Vigano like every other week.
Yeah.
He shills him a lot. And it's like, what? Like, what's so good about Vigano?
The analytics. The analytics are huge. Same thing with Return to Tradition does it too. And you can follow the analytics and see that any video that has Vigano's name in it, huge, gigantic numbers in that community of people that thrive on that. So, but yeah, if Marshall used to do stuff like, and a lot of the followers, they're like, I've known Taylor for a long time. He's who helped me back into the faith. It was before he started doing Sports Talk, Catholic Edition.
He literally made me Catholic. I'm not going to lie. He's the reason that I'm Catholic. I'm not going to lie. But growing in the faith, obviously, I realized that there was a lot of problems.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could be somebody compelled by the powerful apologetic force of Tertullian or Origen and say there came a point in that person's life where they went too far. It doesn't change it. You can still say, man, I lament what happened to Tertullian. He started his own freaking religion, dude. How ridiculous is that? And by the time of Augustine, there was one church left. won, and Augustine was responsible for converting the people back, right? So Tertullian's done. He's over. Origen, same thing. You say, man, it was really bad in the late years of his life after he'd done so many great things and all of this, that this happens at the tail end of his life, and he refuses to take the knee. That a huge problem. I say that about Madame Guyon. Madame Guyon, the fountainhead for quietism. I prayed her method of prayer for like 2 years of quiet. I did that for like 2 years. And, I didn't realize that she was a Catholic because the book was done by a Protestant bookstore, but I was confused. In fact, I still have her autobiography, and I had highlighted words like confessor. I'm like, what is this? I had no clue what it meant, but there was like one word, like they were all Catholic words that I didn't understand. But the Bible verses, they had taken out the Catholic translations, and they had put in like King James or whatever, and NIV. And so they had changed it. So words like imputed for righteousness and stuff. So they did that. But come to find out later, that here she is in a time that's difficult, and there's no spirituality yet that we had through the French school or Teresa of Avila that had not been established yet. And they were kind of almost parallel like this. And it was Teresa of Avila won the day. The French school won the day. And so the Quietists ended up getting in trouble, but it was on really subtle things. It wasn't like a specific statement. It was more like what they didn't say. So they would say something like, if I'm going to submit myself entirely, even if I submit myself, my entire will to the providence of God, that he has complete control and all this stuff. Sounds like Therese of Lisieux, the little ball getting kicked around by baby Jesus. And they say that, and they said, even if he sends me to hell, I will still love him there. There are priests there are spiritual writers who've written things like that, but it's always coupled with, but the Lord would never do such a thing. Because if you are truly subjected to him in all things in your will, God is not unjust to do such things. So you can say that in a poetic sense, but it has to be coupled. But she later in her life subjected herself to the Inquisition, signed the papers of the Inquisitors, and lived the remainder of her days in a cloister, completely silent, and for 7 years, and ended up being able at the end of her life to go to like her daughter's house or something to die. And so, but she lived in a cloister for 7 years, finally shut her mouth. She was finally quiet, which is the weird irony of quietism, I guess, is they could literally just never stop. And so she was finally quiet, submitted, but she to this day is listed amongst the heretics, right? And so her movement was. So does that make me feel for her? Yes. I hope she's in heaven. I hope that it was a legitimate submission to the church, legitimate to the end, and that I can see her in heaven. I do. But does that mean that I think that I should go and read a bunch of her quietist works? No. Same thing with Taylor Marshall, right? Same thing with any of these guys that make a living bashing the pontiff, bashing the magisterium, casting suspicion on the sacraments, making an us-them out of the rights of the church, and saying, the masses within the church to say, oh yeah, well, it's us, them. I'll never do this. I'll never go there. Never step a foot in, even if it's the Pope, and constantly doing that sort of thing. There's too many great shows like you guys' shows, channels like there's channels here, stuff at Meaning of Catholic, that I can go to any of those, and I don't need to worry, not even for a nanosecond, over people like Taylor Marshall and company. I have way better content to watch.
Is this your first appearance on cozy.tv? I think it might be.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
What are you talking about?
The streaming platform that we stream on, cozy.tv.
Are you guys on Cozy right now?
Right now, yeah. You've been on Cozy for the last 2 hours.
I didn't know that, dude. I thought it was just a chat.
Oh no,
Are you okay? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I didn't know. No, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah,
we're good.
You've been
awesome.
Just
Just
for like the last 2 hours.
What's up, Cozy? I'm gonna be famous now. Let's go.
No, you're good, dude. That's cracking me up, man.
I'm also on Cozy too,
Jerry, you're like, oh my goodness, I got to pack away the Adam Waffen flag. That's gotta.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Come on, guys.
Yeah, man. That's hilarious. Like I had no clue, and in fact, I was wondering at one point. I'm looking up at seeing if there's like a dot, because normally, if you record, I record my Q&As after the show. Then I'm like, I'll go ahead and it has a little red dot, but that's me recording. So I've never known what would it have it there if you're streaming to another platform. I've never been on Cozy. This is my first time ever being on Cozy at all, too.
Oh, let's go. Ever. Welcome, sir.
Yeah,
you are.
I heard Fuentes mention you guys about Cozy. You mentioned you guys and classical theists.
How do you feel about classical theists? Do you like him?
Yeah. It's one of these things where like, dude is obviously an artist, man. The guy, he's like he's like Dr. Jared Goff, dude. You listen to those guys and you're just like, just hoodwinked. These guys are super smart, right? At another level. We obviously have disagreements over presuppositionalism. My guess is that he thinks that my presuppositionalism is Reformed apologetics. It is not. He probably thinks that it is Dyer's brand of Eastern Orthodox presuppositionalism. It is most certainly not. I'm a Roman Catholic. I believe in the scholastic, the method, right? So I believe in this. St. Thomas is awesome. Primacy of place within the history of philosophy and theology together. And also natural theology is a real thing. And we can very, very much know that. And so I think if we talked, I think that he would be fine with what I'm saying, even though he may have differences, right? But I think I'd get along with him much better than Trent Horn, for example. Trent Horn, that cat is constantly dogging all the time. He's like, he'll say Protestant presuppositionalist, Catholic presuppositionalist, and I'm like, dude, go look online, just look it up sometime. Look up Catholic presuppositionalism, isolate it by putting it in quotation marks on Google, and you tell me what shows up. I'll give you a big hint. It's your boy.
Oh, what?
It's me.
I didn't know you guys were.
The whole thing.
But besides the presuppositionalism, do you still like Trent Horn though? Like, because I don't know much about like the online drama or anything like that, but Trent Horn has definitely been an inspiration to me.
Yes. So this is what I think about Trent Horn. I heard Trent Horn one time talking about the book that he would encourage people to get. I think it's just Why I'm a Catholic or something like that. I've never read it, but the book and his description of why. So he could have picked any of these other books that are like super deep about apologetics, and he says this is apologetic still, but it's really why you need to come into the church, right? It's not just saying here's the arguments and stuff. It was a real message to drawing people in. It was a real heartfelt thing. I applauded, right? Literally, I'm sitting there. I think I was taking a dump, and I had my computer on. And I'm listening to some Trent Horn. I'm like, "Come on, buddy!" So, no, for real though, I was listening on my computer. But it was, it's one of these things, man, where he says stuff like that. Totally awesome. When he goes and he debates Protestants, I grind my teeth. I do. I grind my teeth when he almost always at this point, because he actually argues like a Protestant. And that's just true. He has to at this point, right? He's saying, look, the video came out, why I'm not a Protestant, and he's strangely enough relying very heavily on the kind of transcendental argument, one based on authority. He understands that for theology maybe, but he definitely uses it. He understands that it's an argument too. So all of a sudden it's like, well, that's not an argument when you're talking to atheists or something. It's like baloney. It works when you're arguing for logic, so you know it works. So anyway, the thing is when he debates them, it bothers me a little bit. In fact, immensely. And his constant mention of Catholic presuppositionalism when he refuses to mention me by name. He was on Reason and Theology with Michael Lofton. A lot of my videos about Catholic presuppositionalism with that name in the title, he's talking about somebody who it's like they're cranked up to 11. and it's off-putting. It's off-putting. This person they're like cranked up to 11. They're so bold. They're so certain. And they don't debate other people. And I'm like, come on, dude. I'm like, you are literally like the police guy drawing my picture and I'm standing right there. I'm like, bro, it's me. But he wouldn't say it. And he looked at Lofton and he says, I'm not saying anybody in particular. And he said it to Lofton like that. I'm like, bro, say my name, dude. Just do it, because I say his. I say if I disagree with him. But at the end of the day, I'm glad he's using the arguments he's using, because they're powerful arguments. And they ought to be sufficient. But they are not. And not because of any lack in the arguments themselves, but because of a lack that's been developed over many, many years, as laid out in Charles Taylor's book, Secular Age, on the interplay of philosophy, theology, apologetics, political science, etiquette, customs, courtesies, culture, techniques, and how over years, the way that things that were started good, saying, I want to learn about nature because of the incarnation. I want to learn about it to see God's glory in natural theology and understand the world and all this stuff. And they go and they study it. And over time, they learn about how the world operates and how it works, but they never see God in a telescope. They never see God in a microscope. They don't see God's providence or his hand in any of these things. And it becomes more abstract, more abstract, more abstract, more abstract. And it's easier for people to imagine that the world, it's possible to have exclusive humanism. No God, where they can say, I have no need for that hypothesis. I can imagine that that's possible. And in that world, we've seen over time that the social fabric in general that we have that used to be able to kind of soften the blow of what's now cancel culture, where there's no fabric anymore and you just have blam, blam, that confrontation. In that way, Ronald Knox foresaw it in the early 1900s in his chapters called Proving God, which he never finished, but he'd foreseen, right, in his mind's eye, he saw a day coming where the Catholic presuppositions that had been established in Christendom for a long time, they'd been running on fumes for a long time. And you were starting to see not only the sputters, but where it's stalling out societally. And you're starting to see other mechanisms moving around and not the Christendom car, right? So you're seeing different systems, different worldviews, all these things just popping up like, it's this kind of creative destruction that's happening. And it's a kind of, it's this supernova effect, right? It's a nova effect. So you end up having this. And in that world, we no longer share our most basic assumptions about knowledge, reality, ethics, any of these things. So the idea that we are going to arbitrarily pick a place that we say, well, we can both reason together, their grounding for their system doesn't view evidence the same, reality the same, meaning, direction, any of these things. None of these things are the same anymore. And they don't interpret the evidence the same. What's allowed to be accepted as evidence is not the same. And they interpret all the available evidence within the construct of their worldview, right? It's inevitable anyway. And so but it's become siloed out. And that causes a problem because these arguments will now reach a place where if we say, for example, there was a guy on Reason and Theology. He was a super smart guy. He was using the argument talking about cause and effect. And he's getting to this point, dude, where it was like, dude, it's rocking. It's right at the end. He's getting to the point. It's universal in its scope. Cause and effect. It's finally reached it. It's the coda, right? It's the crescendo. It's the coda of the song that's super pumped up, the fist that comes down in a song. You're reaching that point. And all of a sudden, he kind of sputters. And he kind of, there's something going on. And Michael says, well, what's the best argument you've heard in response to what you're saying about this? And I knew what he was going to say. He said the fallacy of composition, meaning that if you start from an assumption that is empirical or that says we only know what we know by an individual by individual by individual thing, and from that experience, isolated experience, we create construct and extrapolate generalities from this. We deduce from that. We extrapolate. When that happens, you are still, number one, you're a little bit begging the question, a little bit, right? But in the modern cosmology that we have a system that's more like Carl Sagan's little blue dot that says your little blue dot in the middle of this, in a little part of a galaxy, in a little part of the universe. And all we know is a tiny little fragment of what's available in the whole thing. And yet here you have these tiny, they're smaller than ants per scale to us or the universe. You look out at the universe and say, what would we know about that? People can imagine stuff like the show Cosmos, Neil deGrasse Tyson with that mustache, maybe the only redeeming quality of him in this case, other than he's in the image of God and stuff. But that mustache is okay. But like, he'll take an arrow in the show and it says you shoot an arrow and it hits the end of the universe and they kind of walk to it and he says, imagine if you could walk to it, take the arrow out and you realize it's a wall and you get up on the wall and you see that it goes further out than you knew. And you do it again and you do it again. How far? Like, what can we imagine? And that's really the main point. What can you imagine is possible here with the limitations that we have of knowledge, starting out as in my brain? And the fallacy of composition says that how can you, having not experienced these things in the universe, how can you speak of them? If you only know originally, little bit by little bit by little bit, you can extrapolate, but where does that end? And can you say with any degree of certainty that that is the way that the entire universe operates if you only know a tiny part of the actual universe? And what happens to the other person who can imagine the universe in a way that is different than the way that your argument works in the universe that it imagines for itself? And his answer was, well, what do you do in that situation? And the guy said, and I'm sure there's other arguments people could use, but and he's a smart dude, this guy. He said, well, I would ask the person, what's your hunch? Like, what do you think about that? And I went, blank, blank. Like, dude, it is that at the end of an awesome syllogistic argument that you're using this argument in a scholastic fashion, you're putting it together using reason and logic. It's mathematical in its precision, and then you reach the end point, and there's something missing, and that is you don't know coherently the universe. You know it analogously, meaning one thing like this, right? It reflects something in reality, but you don't know if that reflects the reality outside of what you know. You have no clue, but you know that reality is there, but you haven't been out there. You don't know what that's made up of. Now we're back into questions with Hume, right? And even questions in causation. And his only answer is, what do you suspect? That's not mathematical precision. That's intuition. What do you do with somebody senses? What's your spidey sense about the universe that we don't know about? Who cares, dude? It's made out of marshmallows. What are you talking about? That's not but for us to be able to speak authoritatively with any degree of certainty on that matter, it would require coherence, meaning that somebody or something knows all things in and of themselves, pre-interprets those things. And if you want to be able to breach the divide that Kant has, right? The various different the realms that we're dealing with, and we're stuck in this realm, and we can't pierce into that other one. If the only way to bridge that is revelation, well, guess what? Our religion believes that God's revealed himself in nature, dude, and divinely, and to us by putting the law on our hearts and giving us a conscience. Our worldview provides conditions for the one who's coherent, has a complete understanding, has pre-interpreted all things, for us to be able to have coherent understandings and make arguments that do extend out into the entirety of the universe, because we are learning from and it has been revealed to the world through the world and through divine revelation, which we can you can distinguish but cannot separate, right? You can distinguish but not separate. And in that way, we're able to save that. And that is what was taken for granted during the time of Aquinas. And even Copleston is one of the people who does a medieval philosophy history book. Even Copleston says, oh yeah, one of the things that people minimize is that he was a theologian first, Aquinas. He was St. Thomas. He was a theologian first, philosopher second. And that his world, the world picture, worldview, was robustly Catholic. There were tons of things, their social imaginary took for granted these things, because it wasn't until the development laid out by Charles Taylor in his book, Secular Age, over periods of time, where that social imaginary expanded to the place where alternatives were imaginable. That plays an important role, and why Knox was worried about apologetics and advanced the idea of a new apologetic that focused on one thing, one argument, contingency. And the reason why is because all the others presuppose it. And I go, he knew where we needed to focus to salvage the remainder. We had to get to the bottom, the ultimate authority underlying these things that gives meaning to the other arguments that we make. And he said, you have to. And he said he feared what would happen if we did not, with the advance of the age of unreason, where the will would be supreme. He was prophetic. Yeah.
Based.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're really smart.
So, I have to. Can I interrupt, speckzo?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I got kind of some breaking news. So, Jer, I kind of went behind your back, buddy, and I kind of texted Nick in our group chat that you were warm to him and stuff like that, and he's like, he seems to be really thrilled about that, and he didn't know exactly who you were, but I told him that you were like a pretty big name Catholic apologist and stuff like that, and he seems really to be warm to that. So I just want to let you know that.
It's good that Jeremiah's on, like, now he's on Cozy.
Who are you talking about?
I was talking about Nick Fuentes.
Nick, are you serious?
Yeah, I texted him. I texted him like while we were on right now.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, I do. And
so I'm sure I'll just, like, check out your stuff.
Do you have any idea who Beardson is?
Beardson?
Beardson. No, all right. Okay, so he's one of Nick Fuentes' good friends. He's a streamer on Cozy and stuff, and he's known for being very abrasive and out there. He's very funny. So basically, Pinesap was like, "Do you know who Jeremiah Bannister is?" He's basically like the Beardson of Catholic apologetics, which is a compliment. It's basically saying that you're a funny Catholic apologetic, right? And he said, "No, I don't know who he is." And he said he's a pretty big name in YouTube apologetics, and he's like very warm to you or whatever. He seems to like you and is telling me and speckzo about the thoughts on you. And he basically said woohoo, and a bunch of people liked it. So it seems that you basically have an implicit approval by Nick Fuentes, the CEO of Cozy.tv. So that's cool.
That's dope. Yeah, dude. I tell you,
you're gonna have a new stream of probably subscribers now just because of that.
Yeah, Michael Lofton might ban you from Reason and Theology, but Cozy.tv, Cozy.tv is the home.
You know what? It's good. It's good that we have another robot on the team.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. Okay. All right. Hold on. I have like one more burning question for Jeremiah, but first I'll let this guy ask another question because he's been DMing me nonstop. Go ahead, Auth Access. What do you want to say? Well, unmute your mic, bro. I'm giving you 5 seconds, dude.
Oh, also, I have to ask a question that Massachusetts Sucks wanted to ask, but he couldn't be here to voice chat. Yeah. But it's like a small one. It's not a large one.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask one. I have one more question, and then I'll let you guys finish whatever you say, and then after that, I'm gonna go to sleep. So, Auth Access, if you want to talk, unmute your mic. If not, I'm just gonna go for it, and then Auth Access, racer simp person.
He's not.
All right, whatever. All right, I gave you a chance, bro. All right, what's up?
I'm just trying to.
All right, go ahead.
I wanted to say this is good that Jeremiah is now exposed to Cozy, because it does expose a new audience, like a younger audience that doesn't know who Jeremiah really is, and now they're gonna be like, huh, this guy likes Nick. This guy is like the Beardson of the Catholic apologist world, and I feel like it's gonna attract more people to his streams, and they're gonna be like, oh, I like this guy, and maybe convert more Catholics. We got to get Kai here. Kai Clips. We got to get him.
Absolutely.
He's a Mormon. He's the only Mormon. So he's...
Is that the black dude?
No, he's like a very high up America First personality who is friends with Elijah Schaefer of Blaze TV.
Okay, I know, dude. I know who that is. Yeah. I know. Yeah, Elijah Schaefer too. Yeah. So okay, I was like thinking like a Mormon guy, high up apologist guy. I forget the dude's name. As I said, I don't watch a lot of like YouTube and stuff, so I get on, I kind of head out.
That's good.
But by the way, I think it's cool. Like it's funny because I'm thinking like, man, dude, yeah, this was an interesting thing because I had no clue it was being recorded, so I was just like, we're just off the cuff.
Yeah,
and I'm thinking this is actually pretty. It's actually really interesting though because it's one thing about media, right? I mean, it's my career, my actual degree and stuff is in that. And so I've studied media ecology, media theory, stuff like that for a long time. And one of the things that is bummed me out is that I think that with the kind of work that I do, I think it has an appeal to multiple different groups, not just one. And these groups, oftentimes, it's like the Nirvana of apologetics, where like back in the day, a Nirvana show might have like preps and cheerleaders grunge dudes, goth people, boomers. Like you'd have like a weird array of people in that place that all they really liked Smells Like Teen Spirit or something, you know, like they heard it on the radio and they thought it was cool. So you had all different kinds of people who were into that sort of thing. And it wasn't just one specific demo. And that's something that in my experience in my life, that's just been true. That I've dealt with people from all different walks. I said that about my admins, that I'm glad to have differences of opinion regarding you know, groypers or the traditional Latin Mass and stuff like that. I'm glad to have that because that just reflects accurately the audience that I naturally have. But one of the things that's been a bummer is that those typically have come through other apostolates that are kind of similar, but then you're stuck in their silos, right? You're stuck in those bubbles. So I've been with Meaning of Catholic and Reason and Theology, collectively 35,000 subscribers, respectable, right? So 35,000 potential viewers, right? Subscribers that I have access to, but I haven't really ventured out much. And I have not talked about politics hardly at all because I'm on channels that it's almost exclusively theology and apologetics. And I really like that, but I'm a political monster. I'm running for county commissioner right now. Like that's what what I'm doing. Yes. I just did a speech last Thursday. I did a speech at the Family and Freedom Festival right outside Grand Rapids. And there's about, 250 people. I did a 5-minute speech there. It was hilarious, made people laugh, including a lady that I made a joke because when I filled out the paperwork, because I live in an area where it's pretty sure that I'll lose. I mean, I'm running in the GOP, and I don't consider myself much of a Republican. I only joined because I liked their boss when Trump was in, and so I said that's the only reason I'm even here. And they understood that. They don't like it, but they understood it. But I'm running now. And I'm a delegate, so I've been a delegate. I'm a delegate again, running uncontested. So by default, unless somebody gets a write-in vote of like 100,
I'm going against you. I'm filing tomoror to run against you.
You're filing, yeah, you're filing tomorrow. I'll be like, Pinesap, how dare you? I know that guy. I'm like, well, you're in good hands. Actually, I'm a little bit grumpy at him, but you're in good hands. But the thing is, it was speckzo. So the thing is that go in there and I'm talking and I'm told I'm not going to have anybody to run against, right? Nobody. And I feel great. I'm there the last day. There's 15 minutes left when I'm filling out the paperwork. I go home the next day. I'm told that I have a dude that went in after me with 15 minutes left to primary. He didn't know I was going. I didn't know he was going. Homeboy was the worst procrastinator than I was. He goes in there. So now I've got a primary and I meet the dude at the state convention. Right. So I meet him and I talk to him and dude's like, tall, dark and handsome guy. Right. Like Mr. Krabs' whale daughter talking about that dude from her dance that's tall, dark and handsome. And I made a joke right during the speech. And I said, I had to make a decision. I said, I didn't plan on having to primary. I said, I just planned on just being in. And I said, I met the guy. I said, it was tough. I said, he's tall, dark and handsome. And I said, it's true. It's true. Like this dude. And nobody laughed. 0 people. But one lady, and she just bursts out laughing. And I look over and I said, she knows what I'm talking about, like this. And dude, all of a sudden everybody laughed. But it was a fun time. But I love politics. I was a chief aide to a lobbyist in New Jersey, the 6th most powerful lobbyist at the time, 20th most powerful man. That was during the year that Governor McGreevey was the governor. So the guy that came out and said he's a gay American and such. So the guy I worked for, I was his chief aide. I was with him every day, suit and tie briefcase guy. And of course, then political activism, Leadership Institute, all that, YAF. So I've been involved in politics and did AM/FM talk radio for a long time talking about this. Even YouTube, my early stuff is almost all politics. And for years when I came back to the church, 5 days a week, 3 hours a day, politics. But then now it's theology and apologetics. And I love that. But I feel like there's a side of me that suffers. And I feel like there's a networking opportunities that I would really get along with people and that I would benefit greatly from connecting with people who I'm not connecting with them. And that they're all surprised when they hear, wait a second, you were part of the editorial board of the Distributist Review. You know, like you were on the founding board of the American Society for Distributism. You took the pictures at the Novak Stork debate. Like they didn't know. They have no clue.
So epic.
And they have no clue that I've talked about Catholic social teaching for years of my life. And so it's kind of cool to be coming in here, right? Not even knowing what I'm getting into, just rolling in here to a chat, and that it works out this way, and that, you know, that people said, hey, you know, I've it's cool to learn about this guy. I'd like to know more, whatever. I'm grateful for that, man.
That's awesome, bro. All right, so one more burning question before I go to sleep, and I will just say that once again, it is an honor to speak to you and to have you on my channel, and it's so awesome. You are a deep inspiration, and definitely helped me, and I know a bunch of other people come closer to the faith. So I just want to thank you again for even talking to us. But I wanted to know, we were speaking about classical theist, and I have deep respect for classical theist, and he's also been an inspiration to me. But we actually recently had a disagreement in a chat we were in regarding the prudential provision regarding the death penalty that was changed in the catechism by Pope Francis. So my question to you is, I guess my stance was that even if it's just prudential, we have to assent to it and submit to it, whether our personal feelings disagree with it or not. And his argument was basically that there is magisterial teaching from before that there can be certain circumstances where you can, I guess, openly disobey it. And I wanted to know what your stance is on the modern take in Catholic teaching that right now the death penalty is not a, I guess, an okay thing to support in regards to the Catholic Church.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things, like I take a position that's more ultramontane, right? Like I would take a position in the traditional way of understanding that word, right? And say the church, and I speak of the church as the church speaks of herself. I don't dare do otherwise. And the church speaks of herself in a way that says that she has competency, authority, and jurisdiction over even economic matters pertaining to justice. She's the mother and teacher of the world for that. And warns the faithful. In fact, I think it's mother and teacher, actually. John the 23rd, Pope Saint John the 23rd, that talks about the layperson and what the layperson's responsibility is, and warns of people who bring her teaching into disrepute, and that it's a grave warning that they're ungrateful children and that they bring disrepute upon their mother. And so I don't do that. I say I would rather give assent. At worst, you know, it's one of these things where it's not inherently a problem. It's prudentially is a prudential matter, and saying that you know, that as it stands right now, the utility for it, and it has changed. We can't really we can use it in principle, the Old Testament, but there's a significant thing about, for example, in the Old Testament, that you would kill adulterers, for example, or kill LGBTQ, right? You were public about that, or you were a public heretic. You're a dead person, but you weren't just a dead person. If you were, for example, if you were found to be gay, you and the victim said that you were going to, you know, said the death penalty was what they wanted, because you had victims' rights in the Old Testament too. So like if they said that, and both sides would have to be punished. It's one of the reasons why it was unjust what was happening to the adulteress, right, where they picked up the stones, was because, as far as the story says, there wasn't the other person there, which meant the due process wasn't even done. They were in fact doing something wrong in doing that. So he without sin cast the first stone. They know that the one to cast the first stone would have been the victim, but the other ones to cast the stones would have been the people. So we would have been involved in that, us in this room right now, especially men. We would have been involved and required to be part of that sociocentric solution. And that would be for stoning, for example. Other ones would have involved fire. Other ones would have involved sword. Typically, those things were associated. The symbols were in kind of symbolic of what the sin was. So if it pertained to, let's say, you know, something to do with the altar, something to do with the priestly system, or whoring yourself out, a heretic and stuff, that might involve a different kind of death than another kind that would be more sociocentric. But either way you cut it, It's not the same, right? It's developed over the years. And we've taken a position, even regarding dialogue, that is a different approach. It doesn't change the nature of the situation. It changes how do we deal with this? What's the best way to deal with this? The Index of Forbidden Books is a good example. The Index of Forbidden Books, you could still have an index. There's nothing that would bar the index. It's highly impractical, right? I mean, at this point, you have everybody can publish what they want. I mean, like, it's not like it was back in the day where it was a more select list of books that you would have on the index. So now people cranking out books left and right. It'd be a never-ending story. So we adapt to that and say, how do we address that in this given situation? The church, of course, can tighten her belt on this. It can loosen it and tighten the belt without any injury to the church's indefectibility or immutability. However, one thing that I staunchly oppose in the entire mix is the idea that individuals or individual nations can take it upon themselves to say that on matters pertaining to morals and justice, things like that, that we can take it upon ourselves to make a decision regarding what can be done and what doesn't need to be done, even if the church has said otherwise. Because to me, if we take that standard and you say, well, it's, we can go back and look at the very beginning of that, automatically you've broken out your fancy monocle from, your box of Captain Crunch, and you are now looking in the ancient scrolls to find out what you think is the real truth. And if I have to stack up you and what you say is the real truth and what we really ought to do as an individual or as a group or as a nation even, I don't care, and I have to stack that up against an institution that is assured the charism of infallibility and is the keeper of the keys to whom I go to in order to settle a dispute. In fact, we could settle it this way. I would have said, respectfully, of course, to classical theists, respectfully, I would have said, well, we have a disagreement. I'm sure you can get 2 guys or 3 guys, and I can get 2 guys or 3 guys, and we're going to still disagree. So let's fast track this and just go to the church. But that's the very institution that made the rule that we're talking about. Like, so if you don't see the issue here, like they'd say, we already said it. I don't know. What are you talking about? You're not accepting the ruling we've already made. Already. So what are you doing? Like, what is this? So, and maybe we'd say, well, look, we think you were wrong. We think you were wrong. And if the church says, you know what, guys, thank you for bringing that to our attention. We made a big oopsie doops. Super big mistake, dude. The idea of this would be so, because it goes to the throne room. It goes to the throne in this point. The idea that that's just how this works. Yeah, no. So I would say, no, we give our assent as we must. We do as we ought. And at the end of the day, I pull a Pascal's wager and say, if I disobey and I'm wrong, wicked bad. If I obey and I am wrong, I've given assent, and I can be faulted for what? Giving assent to the church and saying, these and all the truths that the Catholic Church teaches, I believe because of God. Because God can't deceive, and he can't deceive or be deceived. So I believe these and all the teachings, all of them. I believe all of it, and not because I have a fancy monocle and I've looked in the scrolls and come to a conclusion that it's all matching up and all that. Not because the Pope is like an oracle with some special magic thing, but because God assures it. Christ died. Christ rose again. He made promises to the church. He promised he'd be with them to the end, that he would guide them into all truth, that they are the pillar and foundation of truth, and that we need to go to them in our disputes, and that if anybody does not listen to the verdict of the church, they are to be treated like a heathen and a tax collector. And the final thought is to just echo, who I've echoed numerous times, St. Francis de Sales, that says, if anyone would like to continue speaking of this, I will simply treat him as a heathen and a tax collector because the Lord has required it.
Based. Yeah, that's basically my position. My position is like, I can't debate you. Maybe you could pull up some like magisterial documents or something like that. But like, I just go like, okay, the church says this is what I submit to, and I call it grug brain Catholicism. That's what I assent to.
Yeah, dude.
But
that's what it is, isn't it? Like, dude, okay, my show is for the Johnny Q and Sally still. Okay. I say my show is for the Johnny Q and Sally Sue sitting in the Catholic pew. That's my mission in life. I try to bring difficult things and make it accessible using humor, going through books that they may have never been able to read on their own, and making it, translating and talking about and analyzing it in a way that it is entertaining and enlightening at the same time. But the idea is there's something so you said grug-like.
Grug brain, yeah.
Right? Yeah, grug brain. There's something grug-like about this, childlike. The kind of Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so, that kind of thing. This very easy way for the common person who is another day, another dollar, wake up to work person who is not a theologian, isn't going around on a bunch of YouTube or cozy videos learning apologetics, but is an everyday person who just wants to obey the church, love God, and make it to that blessed hope, right? And they have reasons for that, but their reasons might even be real basic. So they may not understand the nuance of a lot of these things, and they're going to hear theologians over here and hear theologians over there, and that's fine. That's part of the debating church that we have. On the other hand, at the end of the day, there is something so familiar and trustworthy about the idea of saying, well, the buck's got to stop somewhere. And if the buck stops somewhere, where does it stop? Well, we have a vicar. We have a magisterium and we have a vicar. The buck stops there. If a theologian disagrees, let him take it up with the church. They will decide that. But I will not adhere to that theologian. I will adhere to the church. That's it. It's a simple thing. And it's why the church knows this. That's why stained glass windows are the way they are. That's why the necessary prayers are so short. That's why one of the blessings of having the repetition of liturgy, the cycle that follows seasons, all that's for the everyday folk, because the vast majority of believers are everyday people. And those people need to trust that church that they have come to, that church is not the kind that they have to look at the label all the time to make sure that the Pope said the right stuff, and maybe can we trust it still? Does it have poison? Is it going to kill me? No, you believe that with the same childlike faith as you do with Nicaea and their verdicts, with any of the councils in the past, with any of the papal statements in the past, and specifically with the papal statements as they are nearest approximate to you, because we presuppose continuity, because we presuppose infallibility, indefectibility, and immutability, and as such, development. As such, the council or the document or the verdict that's nearest to me, if I presuppose that, the continuity, and don't subject it, put God in the church in the dock, answering the questions of me and my monocle, if I don't do that, and instead I presuppose and trust myself to that, believing in order to understand, then all I need to know is, what is the Pope talking to me right now? What's the catechism that's provided to me right now? What is the Mass provided to me right now, and the directives provided to me? And I need to live with an assent in my mind to that, and pray that I can understand and apply those things, because it's more likely that they're true and I don't understand, infinitely more likely that that's true and I don't understand, than it is that I understand but they don't and they're wrong.
Wow, that's so good.
And so leave it at that.
Based
in all respect.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So Pinesap, I'm gonna let you take over. Ask whatever you want, and then we're gonna be finished.
Yeah. So I literally, Jared, we've taken so much of your time, big guy. I just had one question that I promised I would ask for Massachusetts Sucks, and he wanted to know, what's your favorite like prayer devotion or like prayer exercise?
The little flower, the little flower chaplet. Therese, it's the number of beads for the number of years that she was alive. You begin with an Our Father, and then it's of course sign of the cross, then the Our Father, and then you do the number of glory beads for the number of the beads. So each bead is a glory bead. That was given to us by my son Ambrose's godmother. It was a very special thing to her. I had it there with me on Christmas Eve. It has been the most special devotion that I have in my own life, the simplicity of that thing. And of course, Saint Therese, come on now. So, you know, it's the simplicity of it, and it's powerful to me because of the loss in my life of my daughter with cancer. And that when I came back to the church, I was still reeling from that. And it was so hard to understand how this could happen. And it's a weird thing. We can talk another time someday about, you know, like the weirdness that goes on in your head, that you lose something and it's bad enough that you almost wish you could die. And yet at the same time, your body and your world is made in such a way that you keep on keeping on. It's a weird, mysterious thing to me. How can you function? Well, I've learned this over time, that you just do, in the same way that you wake up in the morning, right? You can try to not wake up. You're inevitably, whether it's the sun or your stomach or the fact you got to poop, whatever, or you're bored, you got bed sores, your butt's getting out of bed at some point, right? So it's kind of like that. But that's a new kind of difficulty emotionally, psychologically to deal with, because now you're moving on. And so these things were all caving in, multiple cross pressures happening. And one day, when I first came back to the church, I didn't really know what to do. I was still in a lost place. And I'm in the car, and I had that chaplet in my pocket because I brought it with me on Christmas Eve. Just because I didn't know what to bring or to do, I just thought I'd bring this. It's been 7 years. So I reach in my pocket, and I grab it. And I started praying. And it didn't take long before I started to think of the profundity of saying, glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. To say that over and over, that you are giving glory, world without end. You're giving glory to the Trinity, even in this place of distress, this place of agony, this valley of tears that you found yourself in. And yet, glory be. Glory be in light of that. Glory be in spite of that. And to me, that was so profound of a thing, that it awakened in me this idea that redemptive suffering is legit. It's real. And it's a powerful thing that is its own kind of apologetic in a world that really is looking more, in some ways, for people who've gone through hell and back and made it out alive and somehow have hope in this crazy world, this clown world, right? And that somehow, even in your broken state, even in that terrible place, you are resolved to never give up, keep on smiling, and remembering always you're going to die. You're going to die. So dream big and do the best you can. Use your gifts and talents. And when you see other people, reach your hand out, help them up, because you may be that guy next time. And to do that with your life, and to realize that the core of that is that glory be. At the core of that is the recognition that some amazing saintly people like Saint Therese, and I have to pray and believe my daughter, that they're taken before their time. But in fact, it was God's time. And the impact of that is going to resonate in Therese, in her case, for the rest of eternity. And for my daughter's case, it's resonating with thousands of people across the world right now. And so I look at that and I say, that's my favorite. And then my favorite mass devotion is the indulgenced method of hearing mass by Father Lassance. So that's an old-fashioned way. Instead of going through your missal, it has a ordering of prayers that kind of follows the Passion. And you're praying along with the meaning and significance of particular parts of the Mass. And Father Lassance, he has that in his. St. Alphonsus has a method of hearing Mass. But I also use St. Francis de Sales. It's in a little prayer book I have, like 1905 or something like that, 1912 prayer book. And it has the method of hearing Mass, where you're not following the missal per se. You're saying, okay, this is the offertory, this is the prayer and meditation, and it's a mix of mental prayer. It's like an assistance in your mental prayer during Mass. And I prefer that to just simply following the words of the missal throughout the Mass. That I love the spirituality of that. And there's a kind of fluidity that's, to me, is similar to what I've experienced when I have been to like Eastern liturgies and stuff, that it's not this kind of thing like rigid where you're reading through and quietly reading through line by line, looking up to see where he is and making sure that instead that's an active participation that I think was lost, that can enrich the Novus Ordo, but can also enrich the experience of people who love the traditional Latin Mass. So I would encourage methods of hearing Mass. Both of those are available. I took pictures on those. They're available in my Wolfpack chat, the Wolfpack chat on Telegram, and also the resource center that we have. And so those are both on Telegram, and you can print them out, save them, whatever you want. And so you can have them for yourself.
You know, I ask as simple of a question as, like, what prayers or devotions do you do? And you give me an answer that almost makes me cry, man. Oh my goodness.
Facts, bro. I got like emotional, bro. That was crazy.
Dang.
That's awesome. All right. So you're good, Pinesap? Anything else?
Yeah, I think it's getting pretty late where I'm at. I think it's late for all of us, and I want Jared to go to bed and stuff. Like, I could literally talk to you for hours, brother.
Once again, Jeremiah, like I wanted to like invite you on the show and do like a full episode, and you just ended up coming on like off the cuff and like ended up talking to us for like 3 hours. That was so awesome. I really appreciate that. Once again, I linked all of your stuff on my chat. Like I forwarded a bunch of stuff, so I hope people join your chat and look at your content. You are awesome, bro. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
It's an honor. God bless you. Thank you for everything you do. I hope to have you on again, and I hope to continue these conversations. Yeah, thank you so much, Pinesap. God bless you. God bless everybody. And thank you for joining us. I think this ended up being a really good stream that I didn't think it was going to be. I thought it was just going to be like a chill, relax gaming stream, and it turned out to be like a very deep theological one. So that's awesome, man. I mean, this is great. This is definitely affecting my life in a very positive way, and I'm super grateful. So good night, everybody. God bless. Thank you. Goodbye.